Ah! Ah!
I don't know. I still think it was
Here we
fun
are.
with
Ah!
little kids. My first year at West Marshall, the principal was like, "You're too nice. Send more kids to the office. Don't put up with that crap." And like the year after Will was born, he was like, "Okay, maybe not that many kids." So I just come in, I'm like, "I've had 3 hours of sleep. Don't test my patience." Be like, "Mr. Dennison, I need to go potty." No, I really have to go, but go to the office.
Yeah, it's funny how those our lives are what a lot of times impact kids going to and from the office. I'm. Why are you here? You know, like, why are you here, Billy? He was having a bad day.
Yeah.
I don't think he got much sleep.
It's a thing. What's fun is when I was like subbing for a high school class in my old school, and they were the kids I taught as 7th graders who still remain my hardest class I've ever taught. And one kid was being a jerk, so I'm like, "You need to go to the office." And he's like, "You're just enjoying being on a power trip, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah, pretty much. Get out."
Wow, he called you out.
Yep. I agreed with him. Still threw him out.
You were on a power trip.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Speaking of power trips, TC's here.
Yeah, I'm all about power. Word.
Power.
It's all.
How are you doing,
how big
TC?
my head is? Yeah, it's all gone to my head. It's amazing.
TC, how are you doing?
I'm good. Pondering what to do for Mother's Day. You know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, buying her a board game, it'd be sweet, but I don't think it would be.
I can't go there this year. I gotta do something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Besides, I've already kind of went on a board gaming splurge as it is.
Yeah.
Ooh, tell me more. Tell me more.
Let's see. I found a used copy of Hands in the Sea for $35.
Nice.
At the same time, I found a used copy of Urban Sprawl for $15, so I had to get that. I found a copy of Clash of Cultures for 40% off, and thanks to Jeff Gamble, I picked that sucker up.
Wow.
Hey, Joe, did you see Trent's message?
Yeah, it sounds like Trent. Maybe he'll be able to hop on, but it sounds like he's gonna be late at best. So I hope everything is okay for him.
Yeah, it sounds like just kids late to bed, all that good stuff.
Yeah, which none of us know how that is, do we, Luke?
No
idea.
Here, I've got one of these like video monitors, and my child is standing up and talking and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah.
Are you? Is it like Paranormal Activity level though? Is he talking to Toby in the corner?
I know it has the exact look. It's just.
I said, yeah. When you showed it, it's like, oh boy, that looks kind of creepy.
TC, that's a good haul. That's
yeah, it was. It just cascaded. I'm like, honey, I'm sorry. Oh, and then the Arkham Horror camp, the Forgotten Age came out, and I was like, oh my god.
So you got Arkham Horror. What was it before that? You were saying
Arkham Horror. Oh, then I got Flow of History. As I was walking out the board game store, Jane was like, "This is amazing. You gotta pick this up." I'm like, "How much is it? $20." Okay.
I'll be interested to see what you think of it, man. It's like a really small Civ game. Whether or not that's it gives you enough of that Civ feel. I don't know. I don't. And maybe it'll be decidedly Euro. I'm not sure. I've played it, I believe, like once or twice, and there's only so much you can pack into an hour, which makes it sound like I don't think too highly of the game, but I really do. I think that it's an impressive amount packed in there, but it's not one that I've played recently enough to really remember that many specifics. The Flow of History.
I can. Yeah, we'll get into it, but it's been a very divisive game.
Yeah, I feel like my version of the Bad Mother's Day like husband thing would be, "Look, honey, I got you a copy of 1817. Oh, you don't really want to play it? Oh, that's okay. I'll make sure it gets used. Instead of the bowling ball or whatever."
Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, since we know now that we're gonna be it's gonna be starting like this, then does anybody have any questions before we get kickoff?
What's our topic?
Train games. I thought.
No, I know. I'm just screwing with you.
Nothing about
rail. It'd
rail.
be great if we showed up and Andy's like, "What's the topic tonight?" Train games. And he's like, "Oh, Oh no, I didn't prepare anything.
That's what I always put. I think I put it in the guild when you posted about it. I'm like, note, weirdly enough, I did not ask for this topic.
which, you know what? You know who did suggest this topic? Our guest.
Yeah.
Luke, you threw this one out there, and it's like, hey man, you never know. You might get rewarded by like ponying up.
It might be more punishment. I don't know what you guys are going to do to me.
That's what it is. This is like the Impractical Joker's punishment. Yeah, it's the big loser tonight is Luke.
Yeah, you ask a question, and then we'll just pick it apart all night. So
there you go. Yeah, it'll be one semantic question, and yeah, just keep picking it apart. Like oh man, one of the podcasts I listen to occasionally is Your Kickstarter Sucks, which is they did a special on the Super Bowl where a guy's like, yeah, so the Super Bowl was on last night. I didn't watch it. I watched Hoarders, and it just imagine where it goes from there. But it
sounds like one year I came in and my students were like, "Did you watch the Super Bowl, Mr. Dennis?" I'm like, "Are you crazy? The Science Channel had a black hole marathon going on."
Yes. So Andy got to stare directly into a mirror for the entirety of that show.
Yeah. I'm thinking about throwing football players in.
I thought you were just going to absorb that insult like a black hole, Andy. Just.
He's going to cause mass destruction. We're all going to get sucked in with him is what's going to happen.
That's probably so.
He's going to cast a magic missile.
That's why I tell my students, I'm like, I like to think that when I die, the universe just ends. Best part, nobody can prove me wrong.
Yeah. All right. No, we can't, Andy. And that's why we need to get started here just in case. So 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, a podcast about board games. I'm the host of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, Joe Sound. I'm joined tonight by Andrew Dennison. How you doing, Andy?
Pretty good. My voice is starting to get back.
It sounds okay. It's not too bad. And your audio quality is solved. So thank you very much, man, for doing the little dissection project we had there for you.
Google Hangout just lovingly switching default mic back to the really bad one.
Yes, the default laptop mic that when you lean on top of it goes bzz, 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 bzz. Well, it's really great to have you on, Andy, and to be able to understand you as well, though I might regret that later on in this episode.
Probably.
Also, TC Reed out on the West Coast. He's not our only West Coaster, but TC, how are you doing after your board game binge spending?
Well, I'm not quite in the doghouse. I'm alive, so that's something.
Well, you got 2 days to come up with something for Mother's Day.
I gotta do something spectacular, man. I'm gonna need some help.
Yeah, maybe we can come up with it. Maybe we can take some suggestions from our wonderful community. Join us in the chat, of which we have a special guest joining us. Who, as we were talking about in our preps here, he suggested tonight's topic and has really dedicated a lot of his recent gaming time towards advancing our topic tonight, which is train games. And, of course, the man I'm talking about is Luke from Hattanooga. If you know him from Twitter, Hattanooga is a you know what, Luke? I'm going to let you explain it. And, by the way, thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. It's fun to talk about train games. For me, honestly, it's a bit of a new venture in terms of my gaming shifts. I really started to dive deep into it after I received the copy of GMT's 1846, which was about, I think, January 2017 is sort of when I picked mine up. And so it's been just over a year. And that game created one of those snowball effects of just bliss and joy and interest. And honestly, it was... Oh, it's a complete disease, yeah. And we can broaden it, not just 18XX, but then you start to realize there's a broader world of things that are train games beyond even just 18XX, but that also have sort of they collide with that in some of their history and some of their mechanics and those sorts of things. And I've just been sort of enamored with in particular the 18XX system, but train gaming I don't want to say it's taken over, and actually I've been trying to I've been trying to reintroduce a bit more diversity after having a year of pretty much pushing 18xx on my regular gaming group at every possible opportunity. But I loved it so much after the first couple plays of 1846 that I'd say a few months after, I want to say into March, like 2 months after playing it hard, maybe, I don't know, 8 times, I started looking for other people, because in my city, there just weren't enough 18xx players. And my search led me to a man named Tyler McLaughlin, who lives in Medicine Hat. And he's around on Board Game Geek. You can probably find him. EE Goings is his very clever title. And I discovered that he owns one of the largest collections of 18xx games. He's got a whole schwack of Winsome and Age of Steam maps and all that sort of thing. And Train Gaming has been, I think he would even frame himself a little bit as an archivist of Train Gaming. And it just happened that we sort of coalesced at the right time. We connected and had the right kind of energy and said, let's make a convention happen around Train Gaming. Let's do it in Medicine Hat. Makes sense. Your collection's there. We were sort of just initially wanting to at least have something that happened for the prairie provinces here in Canada. I'm from Saskatoon. We've got Alberta, Saskatoon, Manitoba, and sort of these 3 provinces have conventions that happen in their major cities, but nothing specific to being a train game convention. I'd say if you're, and specifically 18xx playing is probably happening more out in like Vancouver or Toronto. It's hard to get sort of a collection of people together in such a, sparsely populated area as Canada.
Yeah, but 4.5 hours is just like you said, just around the corner, just down the road.
Exactly. So anyway, that's how it began. Just through some emails and through a bit of excitement, and we made our first train convention called Hattanooga happen last year in May. So and it's a little bit of a nod to Chattanooga. There's a big 18xx convention that happens down there yearly as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yes, in Chattanooga, and I think there's been talk of maybe some of the guys in this local area coming down. I know that we have a local group that does attend Chattanooga, but it's nice to have that sort of a resource for, as you said, a population that is certainly underserved when it comes to collectives, conventions in those areas.
Yeah, and I think it serves those 2 purposes, right? It serves like sort of gathering local, and by that we mean the 4 or 5 6-hour drives, and it also, because of its theme of being particularly just about train games, can become a bit of a, we hope, destination convention for those who are really excited, especially, and I'll maybe mention this as we hit some hyper review or something like that. Just the diversity of Tyler's collection, you're going to find titles there that you probably won't be able to get otherwise.
Well, it's kind of like having a fine Scotch collection, like here we have the 40-year, and because these games are largely produced, on people's kitchen tables and in their workshops, and largely cut by hand, and many times that they're not even complete, and then you get people that fall in love with making their own games. Andy.
Yeah, well, it's fun.
It is, and it's sort of a niche within a niche within a niche.
Yeah, it's that type of a resource is definitely something that I think it's really cool that you look for a way to accomplish those goals, and also make sure that those games are getting love. I'm sure that what was his name?
Tyler.
I'm sure that he's probably beyond tickled that's sort of the driving force behind bringing all these 18xxers and other train gamers together. So
he's one of the most generous people I've ever met, and just like you can see, he's just got joy in being able to share this collection with others that he's very thoughtfully curated.
And he probably would loan a game to you and be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, here you go." Absolutely.
I've got one of his games sitting on my shelf right up here, 1832. So yeah, no, super generous that way. And I think that the spirit of our convention is we just want to come together, play games together, specifically 18xx games. We want to have fun with it. We want to explore some of those like corners of the 18xx hobby even that people don't have any idea about. Tyler's got a whole collection of Japanese made 18xx games that he's had translated rules for. I mean, some of these things you're actually not going to be able to find anywhere else.
Wow.
And
it's crazy.
It is crazy. And he's the kind of guy who's resourced himself enough that pretty much every title he owns, whether they came out with rules only in German or Dutch or Japanese, he's got those things translated and up to working sort of specs. So yeah, it's a fun little thing. If I can make just note of this year's convention, this is round 2 now. Yeah, just a few fun things to do with Hattanooga 2018. We've got a local 18xx designer coming in from Calgary, Mark Voyer. He doesn't have any published 18xx titles, but he is in the midst of working on sort of a handful right now. There's maybe I can put a link in the show notes here or something that has to one of our blog posts, and it sort of highlights 3 or 4 designs that he's working on. He's doing one called 18 Alberta, one called 18 Saskatchewan, so sort of based on the 2 provinces that we live in. And he's going to be bringing prototype versions of both of those to Hattanooga. And yeah, he's also doing a large scale one, sort of with the sort of all of Western Canada. So it looks like quite a project. And yeah, it's kind of neat to have someone come in and, you know, have the accessibility to play some designs that are sort of locally made. And yeah,
I have a feeling there might be a few tunnels and mountains, some, you know, along those.
Just a few. Actually, yeah.
The Trans-Canada.
The 18 Saskatchewan is sort of one of the newest pieces he's put together, and there's been a joke in some of the playtest forums we're having discussions with about just using straight track, nothing else.
Yeah, all the roads are like, you know, I-20. It goes east to west.
no even gentle or sharp curves, just straight track. See what you can do.
Why are they testing out all these like undriven, you know, the driverless cars? Why are they doing this on the coast? They should do this in like the plain states where you pretty much can fall asleep behind the wheel and wake up 20 minutes later and be okay.
Yep.
I think I've done that before.
Yeah, good old corn. Yeah, you wake up because you smell like hog somewhere. It's the salts that'll jolt you awake. But yeah, it is some very flat, uninteresting terrain. So
like I left a town like east of my hometown. Then like 20 minutes later, I'm in a town west of my hometown going, how the hell did I get here?
Yeah.
I got lost in the corn.
Yeah, it is not far-fetched. It is not a far-fetched situation. It's happened to us all here, Andy. So because we are in Iowa, and me and Andy are in Iowa. Oh, by the way, Trent is not here at the moment. He might be coming if he can make it, but Trent also is in our local group and part of who started this. But yeah, we here in Iowa don't have much interesting stuff going on. Though we have had some strangely, I want to call it unseasonable, just because I'm not used to being pleased with the weather here, but just nice weather. So it's kind of bizarre. So how's it been out for you there, TC?
Oh, wet. But I can relate to being flat and boring. I did come from Amarillo. So all about it being that. It's like, oh wow, I'm heading over there. It's gonna be a 2-hour drive, and I can see it from where I'm at. It's gonna be great. Flat, boring. I'll just make sure the wind's behind me, and I can save on gas. I'll just head on out there and avoid the cows.
Nice. Oh, well, we've got here in our chat. We have Carter. We have Murr. Good to hear from both of you guys. It looks like Board Game Trucker is on with a new name. So good to hear from you and to see you guys there in the chat. We'll go ahead now and I guess quickly thank our sponsor, Game Surplus. You should check out. They've got quite a few things that have been added here in the recent past. They did a sale for the clearance section. I'm actually not sure if that's going to be going on, especially by the time this posts. It might not even be going on anymore now. But go check out Game Surplus. They're putting out, helping to support some really great content creators, in like heavy cardboard, like lower player count, and it's just really great that they're building communities like that, because customer service is their strong suit. So check out what Game Surplus has to offer at gamesurplus.com. And now we start every episode here with reviews. We'll go into a hype sec or to our wow. We'll just skip right over the the bulk of the podcast, right over the train games, and just go right into hype. No, we will talk about train games, and then we will be hyping games. Which, believe it or not, I was able to find a train game to hype, and I feel kind of like I stole this from Trent. But since Trent can't make it, I'm doing this now in honor of Trent. The thievery has turned into homage. So, but you're gonna have to wait for that. First, let's get into our reviews. And let's go ahead and kick it off with a game that Andy put in his top 10, but it's not Andy who's reviewing it. Luke, you get to go first here, sir.
Yeah, Wildcatters. Fantastic title. In fact, Andy, thank you so much. Your top 10 was most of the push over the edge for me to go purchase that thing. Other than hearing about it from the Heavy Cardboard crew, probably originally. But
that's where I heard about it too.
Yeah, that game, that was a surprise, and a beautiful surprise at that. I busted it out 4 times over the last month with my crew, and we actually want to keep going at it. We want another month of this thing. It just keeps revealing so much. There is so much interaction in this game, and I think that is what really drew me into it. I'm realizing more and more as a gamer, I'm just loving my games that have high player interaction, and specifically in ways that are beyond just the sort of blocking effects. They're the sort of things where you can leech off your other players' moves. You can join in. You can sort of like some kind of pseudo collaborate, but in very nifty ways of screwing over people at the same time. And this game just has that in spades. I mean, maybe you even mentioned this, Andy, but it does, like, in terms of the level of interaction, it feels kind of like Container in that sense. Yeah. In the sense that you're producing goods, you're using people's equipment to transport your goods, and you're using people's equipment, refineries to, sell your oil there as well. And so something I found fascinating about this game too is it sort of has 2 currencies going on. There's the currency of, at least in the Capstone edition, they're called workers. And you need workers to build infrastructure, right? You got to build trains and boats and refineries and oil rigs and all this sort of stuff. But then at the same time, there's shares in everybody's company. And that sort of functions a bit like a second currency, because when someone delivers oil to your refinery, you owe them some money for that product. Now, once you dump that refinery, or it's consumed in that particular continent, I should say, then you're going to be making some shares back on that. The overall framing and the goal of this game really is trying to get victory points, and it's actually got a fairly diverse way to do that. There's majorities within each of the 7 continents on, and you get your oil barrels into these refineries that eventually, when the refineries are full, get dumped into these sort of majority areas. And so there's a scoring system for that. There's scoring for workers. There's scoring for building refineries. So it sort of has that Euro sensibility of, hey, there's a bit of diversity here. You can pick some strategies if you want. You can try out a whole bunch. And I felt like we've pushed the system around a bit, that we've been pretty impressed with how close each of the games are, despite the different things that players are trying and attempting here. Some people are saying, or trying hard just on winning points on majorities, and then other people were going really hard on winning the Wildcatter auctions, which is another element to the game. When you're competing within each of the sort of, I think each of the continents is divided into 2 or 3, maybe 4 sections, some of them. And there are these Wildcatter tokens, which represent sort of independent oil drillers of the time. And you can win these things for points and for more oil. And it's just so fabulous. I could rant about it for forever and ever here. But Andy, do you have anything to add to that?
I'd say the one thing I might add to it is the other thing that made it kind of feel like Container to me is you're trying to incentivize others to do what you want to have happen. Like, the more you try to do your own thing with your own oil and your own ships, that's actually not the best way to go about it usually. And I like that whole aspect of that, of like, I need my barrels to go into this country, but I can't do it. How can I make someone else make this happen for me? Yeah. And that's really fun.
Yeah, actually, in our last game, we really started to push each other with forced loans. So if you get put into a position where you owe someone some shares because they delivered some oil, oh, whoops, I'm going to deliver oil. This is going to benefit you in the long run. Don't worry. But in the short run, you force them out of their shares and they have to take a loan. I think this previous game, we forced every player into a loan and 2 of them into double loans. It was just awful. It was a mess. At that point, you're just trying to say, I'm going to try to come out on top of this, and that's all I need to do.
Be on top of the body heap.
Yep, exactly.
Well, thanks very much, Luke. I kind of wonder, I know that it has nothing to do with trains, but
It has some trains in it. The trains is one element of the transportation.
So it begs the question, and I'm not gonna save it. Is Wildcatters a train game?
No, I think it
has shares.
It's firmly in the economic category. The shares don't function in the same way as company ownership and that sort of a thing does in some of the train titles. It functions much more like a currency, I would say.
Yeah. I'm going to lead you down a rabbit hole if I say anything more.
Yeah, well, and this can be, we'll circle around to this discussion of what is a train game.
For sure, yeah.
Does it have to have trains?
Does it have to have trains?
Oh,
yeah.
It does have trains in it, Wildcatters does. Yeah, it's a train game. I'm down with that word.
18 love letter, train game.
Yeah, there's some trains on it. Why not?
Oh, boy. So, no, that's just the 18 card version of love letter, guys. Come on. It's not, gosh. Doesn't have to. Not everything with an 18 has to be a train. No, okay. Well, I'm done here. Let's go ahead and shift gears and maybe shift a couple of tracks. And nobody's reviewing train games, so I don't have a my can't segue just fizzles.
I had one down.
There's one on here.
Oh, whoa!
Andy's got one.
Right there, I don't know where Andy's in the blind spot. Let's shift tracks into a yesteryear when everything was the 1800s and every game is named after a year, and there apparently was at least one year that hadn't yet been bought up by everybody who's buying domains, like the new emojis and everything. Come on, no, yeah. Well, anyway, Andy, go ahead and tell us all about the first year of the Civil War.
Yeah, so I got a chance to play 1861 this last weekend, which was really neat. I actually got to play with Sweater Mike from Heavy Cardboard. He does some of the live streams with them. But apparently, yeah, he lives in Ames and like it'll be within walking distance of me, which is weird. But anyway, so we played 1861, which was kind of a good after playing it, I thought of it as a good sort of next step game. So like you've done 1846 a few times. You're ready to kind of take that next step, but you're not yet. You don't want to get in one where you can have like, your feet cut out from under you or something a little too vicious yet. It very much was like a run good companies game, a friendly game. There was just things that were put into place to keep you from screwing each other over in any major way. So like if you sell stock, for example, it's kind of like 1846. Like the price doesn't drop unless the president sells. So there's no real shenanigans there. There are things to do with like mergers. So you do start minor companies, you merge them or convert them into major companies later on, which I quite enjoy as a mechanism I am finding in these kind of games. There's a national railway that does act a little bit like a timer. And I think could be pretty devastating. Although when we were playing it, there was a couple new players, so they weren't quite as aggressive on the train rush as I was and Mike was as well. But yeah, and so it takes place in the Russian Empire. You start minors, you convert them into majors, you buy trains. It's got all those normal tropes. The one thing that I think is neat is that the mergers combine with the small companies to make a big one. And also this national railway, which becomes like a game timer. So once it forms, it basically starts with no money and like puts itself horrendously in debt. But then you start watching and you're like, oh, look, that stupid little Russian company. It can't even get off the ground without being hugely in debt. And all of a sudden you look over like 2 ORs later and it's like, wait, like half its loans are gone. What's going on? And then like a couple ORs later, it's like, oh God, wait, this thing's accelerating. And then it starts like ripping trains out of the bank and rusting other people's trains and things like that. So it's kind of a timing mechanism. If you try to drag your heels too much, this thing will make sure that the game ends in a reasonable fashion. Basically, in the game I played, I was pretty sure I triggered the end game, but it was basically like 1 OR before this little AI company was going to trigger the end game anyway. But it's very much a gentle game. It's build a good route, run a good company, that kind of thing. About the only thing that could be pretty vicious is if you're starting these minor companies and not really paying attention to how fast the train rush is going, at a certain point when the 4 trains come out, if you have a minor company that is left trainless by being rusted, it just instantaneously is taken over by the government railway. Like there's no emergency finance, no, hey, let me juggle some trains. Boom, your company is gone. You do get paid a little bit of money in recompense for that, but you do lose it like immediately. And then the Russian railway puts out another token and has new places to run to, which is kind of fun as well. But yeah, so overall, my review of it, I guess it was a pretty good game. It was enjoyable. I'd play it again. It is, like I said, in that category of, I think, like a good next step. You've done 1846 a few times. You're looking to try something new. This is a good next game to go to, unless you're just insane like I am and like stabbing each other economically all over the place. But yeah, so it's 1861. It was a really enjoyable game.
Mm-hmm. So this is the one that's like Russia, and it's
right.
And it's a longer one still, though, isn't it?
I would say it feels more like the medium length. Ours
it's like
went
6 hours, as in like that's
yeah.
Okay.
Like ours went a little bit long, but you know, like I said, we had two people that were sort of new to 18xx. We were talking a little bit here and there. I would say probably if it was our normal group there in Ames doing it, we'd probably bang it out in about 5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But we play pretty fast, I found. So, it's not heinously long. It's not like an 1817 or 1808. No. I would say about 5 or 6 hours once you kind of have a hang on it and what you're doing is probably reasonable.
This is the one that they made 18 USA out of, right? Where it's
No. That was 1817. 18 USA is crazy vicious.
Okay, all right, never mind. My bad.
This 1861 has an evolution in 1867, which is set in sort of eastern Canada there.
Oh, that's so okay.
Yeah, in 1867, I think if you're an experienced 18xx player,
that will just hang in the air then. So Luke, why don't you? If you're, it was Andy was playing the game. So Andy, you lagged a bit there. You said if you're an experienced 18xx player, and I think you were just tossing it up there. It was the alley-oop for you, Luke.
Yeah.
I missed it. He's back.
But,
yeah, that ball just dropped on the ground.
I think if you're like an experienced 18xx player, I think 1867 is probably the better game. Because there's a lot more options. Because in 1861, all the companies have a fixed starting position. So it's a little more scripted. Whereas in 67, you just pick up a minor and you're like, it will start here. Let's auction.
Mm-hmm.
But for newer players, that might be a little bit too much. Because
it's a little too open in some ways.
Right. Yeah, because if you don't have a good sense yet of what a good spot on the map looks like, you can just put companies in really bad locations.
Mm-hmm. So what's your experience been with 1861/67, Luke?
Just 67 and once. And I think both those games probably are a little too long for my gaming habits. I'm sort of a sub 4 hour 18xx player here most of the time. And maybe 67 you could really hammer out in 4 hours. I'm not sure. 61, I think.
You'd have to push it.
Yeah, you'd have to push it. From my understanding, looking at both these games, 61 seems a little longer, partly due to the fact the map is a bit more sprawling.
Well, the other thing with 61 is there's a lot more upkeep to do with the National Railway, where in 67 there just isn't. Yeah,
they've simplified that.
Yeah.
I think both these games offer pretty fantastic sort of introductions to a merger mechanic. I think they do it really well. There's other sorts of variations of mergers throughout the 18xx, but I think this is a great place to start if you're interested in exploring that part of these games.
They're friendly mergers. Yeah, so there's no like I'm going to use my crappy company to take down your really good one kind of thing with it.
So it's more like who can get on the better side. It's good for everybody, but who benefits more sort of mergers.
Yeah, like you could have multiple players into a merger, but a lot of times mergers tend to be, I will take all of my minor companies and make a big company for myself.
Oh, getcha. I gotcha.
And they still instill that fear: don't get nationalized, don't get nationalized. You know, so yeah, you've got that sort of clawing at you the whole time. But
all right, well, thanks, Andy and Luke, for telling us about 1861 and a little bit of a cherry on top there with the 1867 discussion as well. Let's hear from TC, who's going to be telling us all about a short game that I've been looking forward to hearing, because it sounds like this is polarizing.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping Trent was here. We're supposed to do this together. I'm sad. Where's Trent?
I'll do my best to fill in for him, but first of all, I'm gonna have to go is there you can suck a bunch of helium, you want to make your voice higher. What do you do to make your voice lower?
Get bronchitis.
I don't know.
Well, TC, I have faith in you. You can do this.
So I last week, I think it was last Wednesday, I picked up a copy of The Flow of History, which was interesting because I picked it up right after getting my first play of Through the Ages in.
Ooh.
So here you go, Joe. I finally got it. I could check off one game, and it was the new story of civilization. We played it, and my brain melted, and we screwed up a bunch of rules, and we basically decided we needed to play it again.
Yeah.
So I was walking out the store. I'm like,
first play of Through the Ages.
Yeah, it's just like oh my god, I didn't realize it was gonna be this long. We messed it up. I put my that's a whole story of itself of how bad I messed up Through the Ages. But we all
either that or
messed
you
up.
play with an experienced player who militarily kicks you in the balls, drops you, and then proceeds to kick you again.
So on my way out, I saw a copy of Flow of History, and the store owner was like, "Oh, do we play?" I said, "What's this?" Because we just got finished talking to Jeff from Tasty Minstrel Games. I happen to know this is a Tasty Minstrel Game.
Seth Jaffe. Yep.
Yeah. I was like, "Hey, what's this?" He's like, "Oh, TC, this is a great game. We played it at Gemma nonstop 2 years ago." I'm like, really? This just came out? He's like, no, it was what you're holding is a reprint. It was apparently a really hard to get Essen game a few years ago. I'm like, oh, great. I'm behind a curve again. It's awesome. So we get it. And I have to say, it's a pretty good game. It has been very polarizing. My daughter, Kate, does not like it. It's funny enough, she didn't like Flow of History, but she loved Yokohama. I don't know how that happened, but it did. But there's no fighting in Yokohama. Flow of History has attack cards. Yeah, but blah, 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 blah. She went on. Anyway, how do you play Flow of History? Flow of History has one thing I like about it, has a very, very interesting bidding mechanic. It's probably one of the better bidding mechanics I've seen because it's super simple. You just, there's a card. I want to invest in it. You got, depending on which version you have an investment token, throw it on a card, and you throw as much money on this thing as you want. It has to stay there around, and if it survives, you pay it, and you get the card, and you build your little tableau and execute it. However, if someone can snipe that away from you and pay you for it, and it's like a 2-round thing. So I like that. I mean, I thought Homesteaders had a pretty interesting bidding mechanism. This is pretty neat too. Basically, you're building a tableau. It's going to be 5 ages, and then the future hits and you're done. Which is really funny. The future just hits a tableau. It's like, okay, at the end of your turn, you're finished. I'm like, really? It's the future? That's it? Okay. It's the future's here. And it comes
the future, DC.
After the internet. It's like the internet hits, and the civilization's done after the internet. It doesn't get any better from there, right?
It's not a prophetic game.
It's like, wow, okay, that world doesn't get any better than the internet. Time to end the game. It's the future.
But that's when the world goes down, man. Come on, you know it. That's it. That's the end of it. That's the end of times. This is all 4 horsemen of the apocalypse rolled up into one.
So yeah, it's basically an hour long. I think it's 60 to 90 minute Civ game. It's definitely worth the $20 I paid for it. I would definitely say I would not go out of my way to find the deluxeified version of this game for $50.
No, it's ridiculous. It's a small game.
Yeah, but yeah, like it was really funny because when I taught this game, there was more belly aching about this game. Like, well, I didn't know that could happen. Well, this doesn't make sense. I understand. I'm like, dude, that's another thing I like about it. It's a closed economy, right? You only take money out that resources. Resource tokens.
Oh, communism! I know.
Oh, yes. That communism hit. Yeah, like everybody had to share the money. It's like,
yes, all that closed economy just goes away when somebody buys communism, and it's just like, well, there went that core mechanic of the game.
And then it was like, well, there's no really variation in the game. It's the same set of cards every time, which for a game that's an hour, I think works to its benefit because you can just try out different things. You know what's going to happen, so you can try to prepare for it. We don't know when it's going to come out.
Well, could you imagine, TC, the belly aching if you were playing with a different set every time? If you'd be sitting there like, oh, come on, communism didn't come out this time. I was so counting on it. That's BS.
Yeah, it's called the flow of history, right? It's trying to emulate history. It's not the flow of alternate history, right? It's the flow of history as it occurs. So, it's got beautiful artwork. I love the artwork on the cards. Very simple to teach. It takes a while to wrap your head around it, so you want to play it a few times. Again, it was like hit or miss with my group. I cared for it. My wife, Carissa, was like, it's a good game, but it's not really a Civ game. My daughter was like, well, I like to do military, but if you focus on military, you really can't win the game. So you have to like diversify and do a little bit of everything, which made her feel like she had to like go into certain strategies to win the game, which and it's just a Civ game. She wants to attack everyone, right? Okay. But yeah, it's for the price point, it is $20. Oh, and the rule book is a mess. I have to read that because there's one card in there. It's like, well, how does the working animal works? And you look at it and you're reading like, it's like take a card from the deck and you look at the picture and you're like, that doesn't mean that. So I looked up and there's like typos in the rule book and stuff, which is kind of disappointing considering it's a reprint of a game that was already published. And the rule book and at least the retail edition is like this tiny booklet. And you're like, like, oh, I can't read this crap. So I had to like
magic rules.
Yeah, it's like a little magic rule book. I'm just like, oh, crap, man. So I had to like download a bigger version because I'm old and my eyeballs are going out. But overall, I can recommend it. It's a good game. It's just funny that we played it after playing through the ages. So I'm like, oh, what are the victory points? Oh, they're the liars. Oh, we just played a game that had liars as victory points, right? Okay, it works out.
I do think that there's some inspiration there. I mean, the way that you're sort of working down through different ages and the way that the card drafting line, I mean, it's not exactly a drafting line, though. It's more like open auction that, for you to get cards, your turn has to come back around. But yeah, you bringing these things up is jogging my memory, but it's been a long time for me. I remember feeling kind of similar to UTC. I guess, and I agree with Carissa too as well. The scope of this game and the way that it's kind of like your sort of, hour-long Civ game, there's a lot that gets thrown out. And to a certain extent, I ask myself, like, would I play this one? If I want to play a Civ game, would I play this one and feel satisfied? And I don't think I can really answer that one in the positive. I think that it would, it's got its own interesting qualities to it, but it definitely doesn't really. It doesn't work, first of all, to get you used to through the ages because it doesn't have you managing really much of your own civilization that much. I think it's just basically you buy these cards and then you use them. So it's not going to prepare you for that way. So I can't really recommend it from a, play through the ages, play this first. It's a different thing. It's a nice, simple game. And I think it was designed by a Japanese company originally. Or was it Mo Ideas? I forget who's the original.
I know it's the designer, the same designer who did Ponzi Scheme, which I like Ponzi Scheme quite a bit.
I think it's a Japanese designer, and it does have this sort of like what I would call those sensibilities that are I don't call them like minimalist or just like very much pared down to a core, and it certainly has that. So if that's the type of thing that you're looking for. A minimalist Civ game, then I think Flow of History does succeed for that. That's not really what I'm looking for.
That for me, it doesn't see so much as a civilization as it does as a bidding game, and as you know, that mechanism of bidding for cards and deciding, okay, I'm looking at this board, do I want to invest in something, but I really want that card that Joe put all that money down. I really want it, but I don't want to give him all this money for it because he's going to go around and get something else. I can just harvest and get some money, but the supply is not really full, or I can just execute the action on this card for an action. When it comes around your turn, there's quite a bit of choice to have and you know what's coming up. You know, like, oh, you know, I really need to get up here because he could attack, and I need some defense. And hang on, yeah, no, I'm APing out. I'm APing out on a one choice. It's
It's a really cool system, though. Like the amount of money you put down, they have to pay. They can like essentially rob that card from you by paying you that much money. So you could just put a ridiculously high amount for something you really, really want, but you know, that way, if you get, you know, if they buy that card from you, you're just like, you know, I have all the money now. And it is, like you said, a closed economy. So that can only happen so much before you just roll and get every choice that you want and, you know, break the game. So it's cool. And that core mechanic of an auction system, you know, trying to deprive other players is very well executed. I agree with you there 100%.
Yeah, it's done in a quick, it's a big game that's quick, which is really nice. It's not like I go 1, I go 2, I go 3, I go 4, I go 5. Fine, I go 6, I go 7. No, I like these okay, I'm putting 7 here. Deal with it.
It's like a purchase price auction. I like that type of thing. They do that in Modern Art, a fantastic auction game where you have to you put out, like, for certain ones, you could say I'm auctioning this painting. It's $30. You want to buy it? And I really like that too. TC. It's you know, becomes a binary choice after that, which is really cool.
And for $20, it's great. Then I see somebody with the deluxified version. I'm like, oh, you paid way too much for that. But okay, metal coins are cool, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, even the bigger box games, you know, those deluxified versions can, you know, they're a whole. That's a whole nother nest, man. That's another.
And I'm gonna get. And in a future episode, I'm definitely gonna get Kate back on here to talk about Yokohama, because after playing Flow of History, she didn't care for it, and then she played Yokohama and just like she crushed everyone at the table on that game, just blew everyone away. Like he almost lapped me in victory points. I'm like, are you a savant at this or something? What's going on? I thought you didn't like these tap games. No, it's pretty neat. I'm like, okay, we're gonna play this again. We're gonna get you on the podcast. I want to know what happened.
That's cool. I still haven't played Yokohama. I really, really want to. So, but
well, thanks, someone who would play it with you. Trust me, I got someone here who would play it with you.
All right.
All right.
Well, that was the Flow of History, and now I'm going to round out here with, I guess, maybe the lightest game. I don't know. Decision-wise, I don't know if it'd be Flow of History or Thunderstone Quest, the game that I'm reviewing, that would take that prize.
Oh my God, you got that thing weighs like a metric ton.
It's a big box, yeah. So this was a game that was kickstarted, but by AEG, so an established board game company running a Kickstarter, where they basically had tons and tons of stretch goals, you know, like one every $3,000, and I feel like it got up to like $400,000. So there's like just bunches, you know, just bundles of stretch goals, because every stretch goal was like an extra 2 cards. And you know, it ended up being like 1,000 cards I got for like the price of it's 1,000+ cards, and then a whole bunch of tokens, a whole bunch of cardboard pieces, miniatures, actual plastic miniatures. So Thunderstone Quest is the latest in the Thunderstone series. Started with Thunderstone, one of the first Dominion clones, so to say, that tried to, as many on the thematic side of the mechanisms versus theme debate like to say, they say it's Dominion with theme or Dominion with purpose. And Thunderstone, what they did is they took Dominion, you know, a game that's pretty cold and calculating and mechanical about getting the most points, and turned it into a dungeon diving game where you are trying to build up a deck so that you can fight monsters, which most of the monsters in Thunderstone go into your deck as actual cards that you can use in the future. And they kind of took that mechanism out for Thunderstone Quest. So monsters don't enter your deck, but instead, when you fight a monster, there are certain effects that you gain. So the things that are different here, if you played any Thunderstone games, which, by the way, at the end of the game, whoever's fought the monsters that are worth the most points and upgraded their heroes using experience points from killing monsters to the highest level heroes that are worth most points, they end up winning the game. So Thunderstone Quest adds basically what it does, it kind of takes the pieces of Thunderstone and now it makes so that everything runs smoothly. You've got 3 separate stacks of monsters to fight. And these 3 separate stacks are actually placed out 2 cards at a time in layers of a dungeon. And so you have to like sort of work your way towards the bottom of the dungeon to get to the more difficult monsters. And so sometimes you'll have to do that like turn after turn as you're generating light to get lower down in the dungeon. You're then, once you get to fight a monster, you're going to be trying to produce as much attack as you can. There's a couple of different types of attack. You're going to be taking wounds, which in this game, wounds are generally will make it so that you don't draw as many cards. Your hit points are how many cards you draw at the end of your turn. So the more wounds you get, the less cards you draw. But then every time that you're not taking a turn in the dungeon, you take a turn in the village, and you kind of select a different special role in the village. So there's 4 different places you can go. One of them lets you like double heal wounds. One of them lets you double level up double level of heroes with your experience, which can be really nice for getting higher level heroes because they tend to be much, much more impactful. And you start to actually get differentiation between the heroes in the game, which, by the way, this game comes with like 18 different heroes, and you only ever play with 4 at a time. It comes with like 18 different groups of monsters. You only play with 6 at a time. This is, of course, the Kickstarter one, which they're kind of piecing it out so that it's like each one comes with about 250 cards. But like I said, mine comes with about 1,000 with just all this extra crap. So just tons and tons of stuff. But on top of all that, you're also going to be buying cards that are like weapon spells that go into your deck and that you use and equip to your heroes. There's a little bit of a system for getting more skill on your heroes. Every turn that you go to the village, you can choose a special role that lets you get like little physical tokens that are really nice because you can save them and bank them for later turns. It's, it's like you can get a gold for 2 turns later, or you can use these same tokens to do things like get further down the dungeon by spending light or heal wounds. I mean, it's got things that make it so that basically here's Thunderstone Quest in a nutshell. Thunderstone was a decent concept that had all kinds of design issues. In my couple of experiences playing it, it seemed like everything tended to grind to a halt where a player would have to do something sort of suboptimal that they knew they didn't want to do just to make the game keep going. And it was like somebody at the table would have to pony up so that the better things could come out. Kind of like if you ever played Ascension, that card drafting line could just not get good monsters. You could end up spending your last turn fighting a bunch of cultists, which was just awful, that you're trying to, you build this deck that's so powerful and then you just, you watch it fizzle when there isn't the right monsters to fight, which is really frustrating. And I think that basically what the designers of Thunderstone Quest did is they made sure that you have good options regardless of what you want to do. And you actually usually have choices. So you have 2 different lower level enemies at all times, 2 different mid-level, 2 different higher level. And then once you get through the decks a certain amount, you're going to be then getting to this last amazing epic turn where you draw all these cards and you fight a guardian. And that last turn feels so cool. You feel like you really did just get a ton of points and really got to finally utilize all the stuff that's in your deck. So it just, to me, they've got this game to the point where it really just sings. It moves through all of the kinks seem to have been worked out. This is now like 10 years that Thunderstone's been around, so I'm really glad to see that they've continued to evolve this game. They've added a few things like side quests and legendary cards that are they're okay. I mean, they do add more stuff to the game, but the side quests, I guess I thought the side quests were cool, but I really wanted the side quests to all be like you get a cool weapon and not, hey, you could get a cool weapon or you could go for points. So I guess you usually draw 3 of them and get to pick one so you can kind of choose what you want, what's best for you. It seems more boring, though, to go for points, for the point ones. But anyway, I like the way that the dungeon is a physical place that you're moving through, that every room has different rules that make it either easier or harder to fight monsters. You get some rewards. Sometimes you get kicked back to a lower level. I just think that in general, it feels like a very well-designed, like if you're looking for, a game like Dominion, a deck builder that offers you lots of different choices and lots of different variations, and you want to get like the game and plus a whole bunch of expansions at once, I really think Thunderstone Quest succeeds. Now, on the negative side, the game does tend to run pretty long. The developers did say in the rulebook, they're like, hey, you make this game the best you want to make it. for you. You could play with less Guardian keys, which will kind of lower the playtime. But ultimately, the game feels like it does need to be quite long for the way that they've planned the buildup of the game and the way that it finally plays out. So, I mean, you're talking about a game that's like 2 hours, and I don't feel like the actual strategies are really going to be that much pronounced different from, like, say, a game of Dominion that'll go 30 minutes, 45 minutes. It's just quite different. You do tend to work through lower enemies and really build up, so that you don't get that feeling quite as much in Dominion, which feels more like you're solving a single puzzle. But here you've got a build up that you're working through, and so it's different in that aspect. Maybe compare it more to Core Worlds, but it doesn't have that really deep strategy in it. But I don't think it's really going for that. I think that its audience is going to be very pleased with Thunderstone Quest, because I was able to teach it to somebody who'd never played a deck builder before, and he enjoyed it thoroughly. So, and this is somebody who tends to prefer conflict in games, and Thunderstone Quest has like literally no player interaction, at least unless you play with specific cards. So, anyway, that's my take on Thunderstone Quest. It's complicated. I enjoy it. I especially enjoy how easy it is to teach, but for how long it runs, I don't know, whether or not it's really going to be my big cup of tea, or it's going to be one that I keep bringing around so that, players that enjoy it and want that sort of longer experience, as I run, one of the local game groups around, I might bring it more for like, getting other people into a game and getting them like deeper into the hobby. So it's kind of this weird like gateway game that also can really suck people into a pretty big experience, and it does feel quite epic. So anyway, that's my take on Thunderstone Quest.
Hey, Joe, I have a question. Let's say you hypothetically knew someone who invested heavily in Thunderstone. I don't know who that might be. Might be me. And got to play Thunderstone Advance. Was like, maybe. And then just as they were thinking about buying Thunderstone Advance, Thunderstone Quest came out. Would you actually recommend Thunderstone Quest to someone who already might possibly have a whole bunch of original Thunderstone? Like me.
Well, I see it, TC, as being like, if you enjoy what you're getting from Thunderstone, then probably what you're going to get from Thunderstone Quest is going to be more along the lines of mechanical refinement. Mm-hmm. So if that's not what you're playing it for, then absolutely not. I wouldn't recommend it for. But I appreciate the question. Does that sort of sum it up? Yeah,
because we play, because we hit the same problem with Thunderstone where it got kind of, it wasn't moving along. So we found what was called Epic Thunderstone, where you just like mix everything together and you can buy anything you want as it comes up, which kind of drove my OCD up the wall because I like have everything neat and organized. And Chris, like, just mix everything together. I'm like, oh my god!
Shuffle
but actually,
like
that was the way to play Thunderstone. I found out. Mm-hmm. And we still play it to this day that way, and we like it quite a bit. But every time I say, hey, Advanced Thunderstone, Krista goes, we have Thunderstone. And I say, hey, there's Thunderstone Quest. And Krista goes, we have Thunderstones.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
What you've kind of done there is you've turned Thunderstone into more like Ascension style, because it turns all into like what's available. And that, I think, makes it a lighter game. But I think that's okay with Thunderstone. I mean, it definitely... The card effects are not going to be quite that sort of, drastic change, game changers that the cards in Dominion are. I mean, they're impactful, don't get me wrong, and they feel really cool. But they're all kind of, flavors of a fairly similar, like it's like weapons in D&D. You're not going to find a weapon in D&D that doesn't do damage in any way to an enemy. It's not going to be like, oh, hey, this weapon right here is actually, it's a banknote, and you're going to use it to damage your... No, you're not. Weapons are weapons, right? And so that's what you've got in Thunderstone. And the variation is more kind of like flavor and flair. And you do want to build synergies and stuff. But I can see how that Epic Thunderstone would work, because Thunderstone is kind of a lighter game. But I do think that the design changes they made in Thunderstone Quest make it have more of a potential, more of a depth to it, as well as not getting clogged up in the sort of mechanical problems that you acknowledged as well from seeing. So I only played Thunderstone Advanced, TC. I never played the original Thunderstone, so I can't really say whether or not this one compares. But it sounds to me like you're already getting pretty much about the same feel that I'm getting, but I'm getting it with a much more refined mechanisms. And honestly, I don't think I would keep Thunderstone on my shelf. You probably wouldn't see me having that game around having experienced some of the like lockup situations, just really frustrating experiences. But Thunderstone Quest, I'm absolutely like, I'm happy to have it around here. Oh, and it also it has a miniature. You have like a physical hero that moves around, which I think it doesn't yet have like special powers for them. And I don't know, it's weird. Like there's like 3 really cool looking ones, like a mage that's casting stuff, a dwarf that's got like a boar's head, like a helmet sort of thing. And then this guy who's like Conan the Barbarian, who's on like a pedestal and just huge. And then the guy that I was like a kneeling halfling holding like a lute. And it's like, what is wrong with, like, what is the story behind my guy? Why am I as cool? Like, why am I considered as okay to put in the game as everybody else? But my guy's like this big and he looks so stupid. He's like, it's like this guy doesn't belong with all these other awesome heroes. But there's not any special abilities. It's just that's your piece that you remember, and you're just moving it around to signify where you are in the dungeon or where you took your turn in the village. So, yeah, TC, I would say this gives you more choice than Thunderstone, though. So, in my opinion, it's more what I'm looking for by a long shot. So it puts Thunderstone into something that I enjoy from something that if somebody brought it up, I'd be like,
I have this. Look, I got this one instead. Here you go. Look,
yeah.
Here you go.
Oh, you like Thunderstone? Well, I've got this game that's kind of like Thunderstone, but I actually like it. But no, Thunderstone Quest really does feel similar to Thunderstone, but without any of the things that were kind of deal breakers. So minus all the deal breakers, you get something that that I think is going to be enjoyed by others more than me, but by me enough to keep bringing it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Awesome. I'll be sure to at least try this because I am curious about it.
Okie dokie. All right. Well, let's welcome our engineer Luke on Train Games. The topic that he has as engineered for us as our, I think there's 2 different word uses of engineer, right? Like that's, the civil engineering versus the train. and Andy, maybe you'll be the conductor, or maybe you'll just be the caboose.
I don't know what I'm gonna be because I was like, I know he's gonna talk about train games. I'm like, cool, I'll check that, see what train games I have in my collection. Maybe we'll do the top 5. I realized at that point I don't even have 5 train games. So I'm gonna be really helpful in this episode, guys. It's gonna be fantastic.
Well, why don't we start off with what is a train game to you? I mean, these are the sorts of questions that do have subjective answers. So,
yeah.
What is a train game to us? Ooh,
a game with trains.
I guess I was maybe wondering to sort of double up on that question. Like, is there anything mechanically specific to a train game that you would equate? Hey, yeah, this if it has this kind of mechanic, like, is it route building? Is it like, what is it that sort of suggests that it's a train game?
I would want to be here, trying to be as casting as wide of a net as I can here. The dictionary is going to have, it's not, dictionary doesn't just have one definition, right? It has number 1 and how is it used. It has number 2 and how is it used, right? And I would say that somewhere down the line in the 2s, 3s, 4s, 7, 1894s is going to have a definition that specifically relates to 18xx games. Because I think that a lot of train gamers, if you are a train gamer and you've never played an 18xx game, I think that other train gamers will not identify you as a member of their group. And whether or not that's fair. But if you are somebody who enjoys games that include trains in them, like a train game could be something, like that number 1 on the Webster's dictionary would be like, any game that includes trains in it at any capacity. But I do think that there's like somewhere that, where you can see a lineage that is shared between many different games from 18xx all the way down to, like other games that involve building routes on a map. And actual physical trains, but that are not like on a level that's just like, okay, here's a game that's, it's a gigantic picture of a train, and the game has nothing to do with, has no shared lineage with any other game mechanics wise, mechanisms wise. So I do think that there's some sort of maybe a happy medium in between, like train games are only 18xx games, when I was introduced to the hobby, it was like, oh, those guys over there are train gamers. And I thought, well, I played Ticket to Ride. Is that what they're playing over there? And I was so new, I just had no idea. So I think that in between there and the, oh, you want to play a train game? I've got Ticket to Ride, that guy. Like there's somewhere in between where you have knowledge of what it means to be a train game, but not necessarily like have it so pinholed into a train game has to be this specific, mechanically similar. Like to what point is every 18xx game a variant on 1830? There's some legitimate questions there, but I've talked a lot, and I hope that somewhere in there you guys can make some sense of it, and I'm done now.
Well, I don't know what constitutes a train board game, but to be a train board gamer, I think you probably have to have a certain amount of an unhealthy obsession with model trains. I mean, everybody who's like super obsessed with like an 18xx game or some type of train game at one point has like just had to, oh, I got this H-scale train in my basement and it got little trees and stuff. I'm like, yeah, cool.
See, for me, it's different because there are a lot of like people I know in the 18xx community. They come by it having been an aficionado of history initially, that they really like the history of the railroads and railroad company. And that's never like, it doesn't bother me, but it's not necessarily like a super appeal to me either. The draw for me, I think, is that there's a lot of interaction and like beating myself up with numbers. It's kind of like what I find fun about them more than the history. But I don't know, for me to really start thinking of it as a train game, I would think for me, you've at least got to have some kind of route building just as a base framework. Before really, I mean, there's other games that are quote unquote train games that don't have it, but before it really starts feeling like a train game to me, it has to have at least route building, I think, to it. And not necessarily stocks, but at least some route building. And then I think the next level of where I go, definitely playing a train game now is route building combined with some form of delivery or payout.
Yeah. I think when I think about train gaming and their origins, I think trains, there's an appeal to just wanting to play with trains, like kids. I have a 3-year-old. He just loves watching trains go by. It's so exciting every time he sees one. There's model trains at the museum that we go and look at, and it's just like that's a big deal. It's just so exciting. I love watching these model train creations that people spend hours pouring into. It's actually unbelievable the amount of talent these people have, and just sort of this. It's there's a playfulness to it, right? And I don't know the exact origins of train gaming in the board gaming hobby. My understanding, and Mur, who's in the chat, might be able to correct me here, is Crayon Rails prior to 18xx?
I want to think yes.
I think it is. And I think there must be some evolution there or some shared history. But I think Crayon Rails might be sort of one of the genesis of train gaming in many ways. And that one is very pure in terms of the sort of pick up and deliver and route building combined. Have any of you played Crayon Rail games?
That's like the one category I haven't yet. Not because I've been avoiding it, just because there's never really just been an opportunity.
From what I understand, I'm having played Power Grid. It's basically built off of a Crayon Rail system. It's like he took the costs of like those and I feel like I'm lifting this off of. Did you say that? Did you say that, Luke? I feel like it was maybe Mur. It's one of our wonderful community members on the guild. Basically gave me the information I'm giving now, and it's probably right here in the chat has been talking about Power Grid as well. So thanks guys for and I'm crediting you here. So send the footnotes. But I played Power Grid, and I have read the rules to Iron Dragon, which is like the fantasy themed Crayon Rail game that Mayfair is reprinted, which I thought was just bizarre to see, like, a Crayon Rail game that originally came out like 1994 or it was in there. I think it was in the early 90s. To see it reprinted now by Mayfair, especially as might be their last game. Rip. Oh. So I've not played one. Have you played one before, Luke?
I've I've only played India Rails, which is just Crayon Rails in the country of India, and played a number of times. For me, it was intriguing. It was actually pretty early in my entry into the board gaming hobby, really, and so I did enjoy. There's a real nice tactile thing going on with Crayon Rail games, because you literally are drawing with a crayon, and there's this sort of like counting out, okay, how far can I build, and you sort of have to connect dots as you go. Essentially, it almost is like, it feels like a bit of a paint by number, or sorry, no. Those connect the picture by dot things, right? And then you're basically having these kind of fulfillment cards. It's like, deliver this to this is what I remember. This was a number of years ago. What I do remember distinctly is it was very long for what it was, and it felt like I was doing a lot of deliveries just over and over. It might have been that particular title. There might be much more nuanced versions of the Crayon Rails game, or Crayon Rails games, but I also don't have that great experience with that.
I want to say I've heard some people that are more into the 18xx world I've heard complaints about the interactivity is much lower and such, so the tension is not enough to support the length of the game that it is. I like I said, I have no personal experience, but that, like, I've gotten that feeling from some people.
Yeah. I'm not sure how widespread Crayon Rails is at this point in time. I know
XX even so.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, simply based on my experience at Hattanooga, like, Crayon Rails is one of the 4 sort of whatever you want to call them systems, and the systems we offer at Hattanooga are 18xx, Age of Steam, and that, I'm going to use that term, all-encompassing of Steam, the Railsways of the world, that sort of piece of the puzzle. Winsome as sort of its own system genre thing, and then Crayon Rails. So those 4. And I don't think Crayon Rails was played. I know that we had a host who was ready and willing to teach anyone who was a bit of a Crayon Rails fan. But yeah, that's sort of just from
I think when I went to HeavyCon, I saw probably at any point in the day 2 to 3 18xx's being played, and I think I saw one Crayon Rails game once. And that was because it was Jeroen from Splotter was there, and apparently he really likes Crayon Railways, and so he's like, I want to play a Crayon Railway, and of course, being Jeroen, he's like, 3-4 people, I'm willing, we'll do that.
Yeah. Well, I think also to talk about train games, we should circle around Ticket to Ride a little bit here.
Oh, right. Yeah, I was gonna.
Because I would say that's probably the most popular, let's frame it, at least thematically, train game that I know of, right?
I own that one.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that one fits in, Andy, with your definition, and something that I think is fairly important to train games is the route building aspect. I think Ticket to Ride sort of combines route building and set collection, but honestly, the route building, I think, is the really compelling piece there, right? Like the set collection is a little willy-nilly in some ways. It's the timing, and it's the actual building of those routes that is quite, I think, appealing and compelling about Ticket to Ride.
And I would agree, because also, like, when you get new maps for it, it's almost always like a new iteration on the route building aspect for most of them.
Well, does it start to push even more into being a real train game when you look at some of the expansion maps that actually add sort of a, not necessarily shared ownership, but maybe more like a, like a payout that'll be based on whoever has acquired the most, stock. So it has stock in,
really neat. Yeah.
The Pennsylvania map has stock. I mean, it's kind of stock in name only. I would call
like it. It's more of like an area majority kind of thing almost.
Exactly. They
call it Ticket to Ride. I like it so much. I got the 10th anniversary edition of that game. And even last Wednesday at game night, I was helping a new couple came in, really didn't have any experience with board games, and they were trying to actually figure out how to play Ticket to Ride. And the beauty of that game is its simplicity. I sat down and said, look, okay, I can teach you Ticket to Ride. It's easy. You do this. Here's what you need to do. You get sets, you do that, you score, you move up the track, and you do that till you win the game. Oh, you mean I can block? I can block my wife by taking this route. If I get it, it's, yep, absolutely you can, and she can't complete that route. She's got to go all around and make it a lot longer so you can get more points. The simplicity of that game is fantastic, and plus the little plastic deluxe edition little rail cars are just so cool. They come in like metal tins. As soon as I saw that 10th anniversary edition, I was like, yep, I don't care how much that costs. That's going in my collection.
Well,
and it's just a wonderful game to break out to teach people and get them really excited about the industry, the board gaming in general.
Yeah. And now they even have the for kids, the My First Ticket to Ride or something like that.
Yeah, My First Ticket to Ride.
Which my 9-year-old really enjoys. Like, we'll play that together, and I'm hoping someday, in a few more years, we'll try a Chicago Express or something.
Just go small. Liam, my son's getting into that. We kind of skipped over. We're playing regular Ticket to Ride, but yeah, even that My First Ticket to Ride's really neat. And then you can and what's really nice about Ticket Rides, you can go up from there, like Europe. Oh, now we have stops, and another one. We have passengers. Oh, you want a really mean version? Get Africa. Man, you'll just punch each other in the face all game on that one. So,
yeah, there's a lot of maps for this one now. Yeah, and I think beyond just changing the dynamics of route building and obviously the geography, there are some interesting differences in how to get points, like scoring, right? Like you're saying passengers in the is it Germany that does the passengers?
Germany, it was originally Markland, and then
Markland, it's Markland.
Yeah. The new one's called Germany.
Okay, I've played the India map. That one has, you can sort of do these
like circles or something.
Yeah, these circles. It's these kind of like circuitous routes that get you more points. I had to throw in a big word there. So.
Ooh. So the thing is, like, do you think that Ticket to Ride is one of those where it squarely stays outside of the train gaming? Like, is Hattanooga going to ever, like, would that be something that you guys would offer, is like, maybe a separate room where it's kind of more like
a separate room? Yeah, let's isolate these newbies.
Next to the card. You go next to the Cards of Humanity people. Go over there.
Oh man.
Oh, it's a dark stain on train gaming. No,
I'm already assuming that you're already sectioned off. I don't know. When you said 4 systems, it's like, okay, well, is there going to be like the I'm just assuming them being in different areas. Okay, so just to, like what would be best is if you did like a playpen and then a couple of picnic tables that are super, super low to the ground, and then put Ticket to Ride on them. Right?
Yeah,
so
that would send the message, right?
Yes. If you play this game, you are a child. That's right.
That's made by Days of Wonder. Oh, that's a popular company.
Yeah, now.
Yes, give them have every other place gets gets pizza catered, and they have like Happy Meals and little toys, and you can get temporary tattoos.
I'm all in that room.
You know what? We actually had a walk-in off the street at Hattanooga. If you can imagine it, there's actually people walking around Medicine Hat. It's a large enough town, I guess. And they came into our venue because they saw posters, Hattanooga Train Game Convention, and they asked questions about, do you guys have Ticket to Ride? That's enough people know it. I wouldn't knock the game in that.
Ubiquitous that game is.
Absolutely.
Board gaming, you got Catan, Ticket to. It's like one of the top 5 evergreen games that's mentioned in like one breath.
Well, yeah, that's the thing that's good about it. In terms of train gaming, like, you probably won't see a lot of like quote unquote serious train gamers playing Ticket to Ride. But I'll tell you what, if I mention Ticket to Ride to a group of middle school students, a lot of them know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good intro into kind of the idea of train gaming. And then there's several next steps you could take beyond that. Maybe a new Ticket to Ride map. If they're particularly savvy, that maybe it's time to jump to a Chicago Express or a Paris Connection from that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a really good leading point. And as far as a game that's going to have that mass market appeal as a train game, I think Ticket to Ride works wonderfully.
Mm-hmm. And I have an interjection here, Andy. When you were defining in your notes, which that was you, Andy, it was your notes that I'm referring to, I hope, on our document.
I don't even remember what I wrote now.
Well, you said something about how they were primarily strategic games over tactical games, meaning that you're going to be able to look at the board and sort of plan out a strategy in your head. And I really do think that Ticket to Ride gets you there. I mean, by the route building. you know, it's your job is to acquire, and obviously the tactical element is in the cards, which we've had some discussion here in our chat. You know, from David, who's joining us as well. You know, Ticket to Ride's that sort of just keep drawing 2 off the top until you've got like a hand of like 30 cards, and now it's time to actually play the game.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's definitely elements there about trying to most efficiently, you know, obtain cards that you can use. But it's all about sort of like you have a bigger overarching goal in the form of destination tickets, and that is something that would be a common ancestor, you know, with train games in general, with what you guys have identified as the 4 main systems of train games, especially when you look at like Winsome games, you know, that like where there's kind of a certain route that you're going for. Now, obviously, and Crayon Rail games, maybe even Crayon Rail games more so than Winsome games. But it's just interesting to me, and I do feel like it belongs there because Andy identified strategic, and I do think that Ticket to Ride gets people deeper into the hobby because it has a strategy that goes together with tactics.
Right, and I feel that way about a lot of train games. Like, there's definitely a strategy to it, but there's tactical in that, you know, maybe you get cut off in your route building or something like that and have to work a way around it. But most train games I've played, there is kind of an overall, these are my goals for this game kind of feeling.
Well, if I can make a bridge between a train game and your review of Thunderstone there, Joe.
Well, that's quite the bridge.
I'm on the edge of my seat here, man. What's gonna happen?
Well, trains. Have you guys come across Trains, the deck building train?
Oh yes,
game?
I like that one.
Oh yeah.
Junk, putting junk in your deck. Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, that junk. That's the worst. But that game is fabulous. It was actually it was a game that my wife and I played with another couple. Oh man, we must have played that thing 60, 70 times. I mean, we loved it. And that one's interesting because it actually, like, again, centers on route building, and that becomes a really important dynamic of what you're doing, right? There is blocking in the sense of like you're taking out taking over hex spaces to incur more cost for the next player who does, and that sort of
like
thing.
A Winsome game of sorts. Like, it's almost like a step into Winsome games.
Yeah, the board at least is reminiscent of that for sure. And I think that's something that we really enjoyed about it is the board draws everyone together. Right there's interaction baked into the game simply because you're building on top of each other and you're messing with each other's with each other all over the place. And that's something I think is, you know, also fairly central to my understanding of train gaming. You know, Ticket to Ride, you're interacting. You're often, I always know these moments when I was playing Ticket to Ride where someone takes the one route where I had 4 orange cards and that was the only route I needed. And it's so frustrating, right? But that interaction is great because it's all about timing. And that's something I think I see in the game of Trains as well, is there is some timing questions to be asked when deciding what to do with your hand in a particular turn, right? So
it definitely adds more than just, you know, what card do I get, and then, oh, I've got a card that lets me build track. It's, you know, you got to be careful, and I think that, like TC said, it's got that sort of junk that you're trying to manage. So I mean,
man, the first time I played Trains, that's all my deck was, man. But I also like the board. I just love how that was the first deck building game I played. One of the first ones I played that incorporated a board and just put, like you said, just Luke, just putting it right there and everyone interacting with it. Wow.
Well, and it made me just so much more interested in everybody else's turns, right? I'm like, what are they going to do? I mean, as much as I find myself with deck building games, I often can get very consumed with my hand. But in this game, I felt like I'm in my hand, but I'm also watching the board because I have to be.
Yeah, it's like it's a physical place for that interaction that, you know, in a deck building game, if you don't have a physical place to interact, it can feel much more like a multiplayer solitaire affair, you know. And I do think that, like, train games tend to lend themselves, like you guys were saying, to interactivity. And I would say Ticket to Ride also has that in spades, that sort of, oh, you know, you get maybe like has been talked about in our chat, you get a train chucked at you by your wife, and that's it. That's the end. That's the end. You never get to play Ticket to Ride, anything but base Ticket to Ride.
Base Ticket to Ride, like, you know, if it's a low player count, you could be interactive, but you can avoid it. But once you get to like about 5, yeah. That's when you start looking at the tickets. It's like, this is a 20-point ticket. I'm throwing it away. There's no way in hell that's ever going to happen.
So these games are probably more like maybe what we brought up so far, like Ticket to Ride, trains. They are like hybrids of this larger train game, genre. But because of that, if you're going to identify them or characterize them, are they a train game? Yes. I mean, like just as much as any hybrid game is, the sum of both of its parts. So would you guys agree with that sort of diplomatic stance?
I think so on those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tricky. See, one of the things I always get confused on train games is like, I have Age of Industry, and I like Age of Industry, but Age of Industry I don't think it actually has trains in it. It's got like railroads, and you're completing routes and you're delivering, but it doesn't actually physically have a train in it. I was like, is this a train game? Well, it's an economic game for sure.
Route building for sure.
I don't know where to throw this one.
Like Via Nebula.
Yeah.
It's a train game without a train. Like they've coated the train game in fairy dust to like make it more appealing. But it's a train game.
Yeah, but like 18XX, you don't physically have trains, but you got the train cards that rust out, right? So at least they're there and you're using them. But I was like, but it's like I'm building routes. They could be anything. It could be like I could be building like a paving roads for all I care, right?
Yeah,
it is. I mean, but like the routes that you're building also drastically impact not only your scoring. I mean, the way that they score seems like neither here nor there, but the way that you can like transport things along those routes, and the way that you're needing to get your sort of line towards a place for you to be able to build on those actual cities. I mean, it's is Age of Industry, Brass, either one of those, would they be considered a train game? I mean,
okay, I'll answer this question by circling back to my thought on how trains, I think, facilitate just sort of a playfulness. Like, so I brought my son to our Saskatoon model train convention, right? And I think maybe similarly, people in the model train world have different enjoyment of why they do models, right? Like some of them maybe like the really technical aspect of like, oh, actually I'm going to do a historic, like I remember one set was a historic representation of a specific town that a train went through with the mountain range and that sort of a thing. Maybe some people really like actually just building the trains, and there's something interesting about that. I feel like there's a whole bunch of levels that you can enjoy that aspect of what you're doing, right? And perhaps similarly with train games, broadly speaking, I would say, yeah, maybe if you're really liking how the train games facilitate an economic game, such as in Brass Age of Industry, I'm comfortable calling that a train game. Now, again, like train games, and then if we want to get like labels, train gamer, that might look a little bit different, right? Maybe when we're talking about train gamers who are investing in the hobby in a specific niche, then we're maybe talking a little bit more about people who are investing in these systems. And that's kind of why I brought those up at the beginning, those 4 systems that we offer at Hattanooga, because those are these sort of, subgenres that have been developed. 18XX is not just one title that does some things and mixes some mechanics. It is a family. And Age of Steam has spawned a family. And I think that to me also represents something in train gaming, because there's people that circle around and want to be part of that family. I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, I think so. And sometimes people, I think with train gamers, pick a little bit from A, B, or C, and then there's some that are just like, nope, 18XX, that's all I'm playing, or Winsomes, that's all I really want to play, or whatever, which is absolutely fine. But I think there's people that jump around all those different aspects.
And just quickly, we've mentioned these 4 different things, but if our viewers, viewers, we do have viewers, but if our viewers or listeners are unfamiliar with these different areas of train games, Luke, would you give a summary of as many as you'd like to, and then you can pass the torch to any one of us? I think that we can at least, if you pass it to me, expect it to be butchered hard. If you pass it to me, expect it to become somehow about attacking and killing and chaos.
Actually, something that Tyler, the friend I run Hattanooga with, he's talked about 18xx games being war games fought with money and trains, right? Like there is something going on. There's a parallel there. But the 4 systems, the one we've talked about a bit here is Crayon Rails, which specifically I think focuses on route building and pick up and deliver stuff. There's the Winsome games, which again, there's a broad diversity there. I don't know if you want to just call them Cube Rails.
Cube Rails might, because they're not all made by Winsome really anymore.
Yeah. I guess maybe Winsome becomes the title because there's just so many that emerge out of that company. Yeah. But Cube Rails generally denotes train games where you, I think it's almost always hex-based sort of maps, and you're developing routes for the purpose of sort of increasing the value of. So if you have a blue company, increasing the value of that company by connecting specific cities or locations. And each of you then are also collecting that color of cube to represent your investment in that company. So if I have 10 blue cubes, that represents I have 10 investment essentially in whatever that company's value is. And so as that company's value goes up, my 10 cubes are valued at a higher and higher level. And so that's kind of the basis of a Cube Rails game at its simplest. And I think Paris Connection is probably, one of the easiest entry points for that. Age of Steam, that one has spawned many different parts of the family tree there.
And it was kind of a branch off of Winsome originally. So.
Yeah. From my understanding, Martin Wallace enjoyed 18xx, and I think he wanted to develop a shorter, more simplistic, but also sort of carry along that Winsome Cube Rails feel. And that's definitely what Age of Steam seems to do for me. And in fact, I think Age of Steam originally was published by Winsome.
Yep.
Yeah. Age of Steam was developed into Steam and Rails of the World, and what's the other one?
Yeah, the Railways of the World. Yeah, that just got. I just saw a huge reprint of that with the plastic.
Yeah, it eventually did get reprinted with the plastic, but they somehow kept that same old beautiful Winsome art, and I'm using the word beautiful there as in a way that I'm parodying Andy, because he actually does love boards that are so disgusting. He has him and his wife remake the board with competence.
It's like the ugliest dog competition. You just gotta love them.
Yep. And then that's why I love to have ugly dogs that I can sit and stare at for like 2 hours and just keep looking at them. Well, so you talked so far about Winsome and how they're kind of like Cube Rails, how they have a shared ownership aspect, and the route building is generally abstracted to hexes that you have presence in. Now, Age of Steam is kind of like maybe a graduated up to from that Chicago Express, Winsome, Cube Rails that we just came from. And what else does it sort of change around? I think that in Age of Steam, well, and I don't think I've played a lot of Age of Steam, but in Age of Steam, you do actually have track that you lay in a specific fashion that does connect a specific part of a hex, a specific entry of a hex to another exit point in that hex with connection points in between, and you can maybe have like crisscrossing track and whatnot.
Yeah, Age of Steam I think borrows from the 18xx genre its route building, but it is a simplified version because there's no upgrading of hexes.
Correct.
Yeah, and so in a sense, it can be even more brutal than an 18xx route building game. In fact, I do always find it more brutal because, hey, you use up all the possible entry points into a city, and you're not going to get in there unless you use my my tracks. So,
I think 18xx. I think the payoff, the feel in that one is the long term. You're playing the long game, but Age of Steam, I always find way more tense.
It's definitely more stressful. Oh my god.
My favorite time in the 18xx game, or not 18, the Age of Steam game, is when you're in the auction and you're going around and someone goes 8 and the next person just goes and like starts going into calculation mode, seeing if they can afford to outbid or not. I I think, yeah, Age of Steam, the difference there between a lot of the other Winsome games is it brings back the pick up and deliver as a pretty big component.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I always in Age of Steam, if I can pay back my loans, I feel like I've won the game. I don't care what the end score is. I'm like, I paid off my loans. I have officially won as a personal victory.
Yeah, if you play Age of Steam, you're never so happy as that first time you make $1.
Yeah.
In profits.
Well, Seth Jaffe, I mean, there's like 4 different games within the Age of Steam category. And then on top of that, like Age of Steam itself has like 100+ maps. The other games that have come out also have multiple maps. Seth Jaffe of Tasty Minstrel, who was just on last episode, had a very passionate defense of Railroad Tycoon as the pinnacle of those games, which was interesting because he was like the first guy I ever heard even mention Railroad Tycoon. Like I didn't, I've heard people say they prefer Railers of the World. I've heard people say they prefer Steam, but never Railroad Tycoon. So I mean, yeah, there's things for everybody within them, even though they are very similar games. And I think that it's a system, right? A family, as you said. And the main sort of connecting thing there is that you actually own your track in this game. Like you represent one single company and you own your track, and there is no shared ownership. But as we've talked before, the board offers like amazing opportunities for interactivity, both in the route building and also in the pickup and delivery aspect. So I mean, these are both hugely interactive aspects of the game. Add to that an auction, like where you're literally auctioning off special abilities, like, and all these pieces somehow fit together, and it does not feel like a very rules-heavy game. It feels like a game that's pretty easy to get underneath your belt, but tough. It's easy to learn, but tough to play, which I definitely think that the Winsome shares a lot with Age of Steam in that aspect, even though you really no longer have shared ownership with Age of Steam, but it feels like much more interactive. Yeah. Because the interaction is a lot more like kind of knifey, I would say. I feel like it's a lot more, like you're not going to find many situations in which you're mutually benefiting from somebody taking an action, right? That's rare. Whereas in Winsome games, it really is a lot more mutually beneficial. There's a lot of I'm helping you, you helping me, even though we're competing. So yeah, with the Age of Steam. So which one do you specifically prefer, Luke, of those 4?
Honestly, I've only played Age of Steam, so okay. I can't speak to the others.
Steam. I really like Steam. I like Steam quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. TC is all about Martin Wallace's second attempt at a game system.
I do like the first. I like the previous edition of Steady and Emerald.
I like the second edition of that one. So I don't know, man. I'm just breaking. I've never played the second edition. Fair enough. That's good. Oh, well.
Yeah, and you know what? Actually, Age of Steam. The guy who sold it to me, not actually literally the copy or anything, but was Ryan Sturm of if you remember Ludology host from long ago. He was man, that guy, every episode, if he could talk about Age of Steam, he was like evangelizing about it. And I just
Age of Steam and Kalis.
Yeah, Age of Steam and Kalis, you got it. Two good games, but yeah, Joe, I liked what you're saying about the auction there, and you're making me think that what Age of Steam does with the auction is it creates all sorts of timing tensions. In the way that you are fighting with one another, because that auction reminds me of a stock round in an 18xx game.
Yeah,
because it's all about timing. It's like, when do I sell? When do I buy? What decision do I make at the right time? Because do I buy this stock now or later? Oh, those things are just fabulous decisions.
You got to balance that immediate benefit that you'll get from like being able to urbanize and put out a new city. Like right now with, you've got that long-term, you're trying to, these 1 and 2 route deliveries are just not going to cut it into the late game, though you need to do them because, as it's been mentioned by you guys and in our chat, this is about balancing debt. Like, and that's the adds that another layer of tension. So, like, also putting the right amount of money in your hands and not $1 more, because that's an extra share that you're going to have to pay back, and lose points for at the end of the game. It like you said, it's about timing, and that's where maybe continue to share a similarity there with like Brass and Age of Industry, largely games that are about timing as well, finding the right window of opportunity to complete your actions and to, you know, because there's 7 actions in Age of Steam, and, you know, there are probably going to be 3 of them that happen pretty much every single round. You know, like the urbanization is pretty much always going to be taken. You're almost always going to see somebody that upgrades their locomotive or does the, you know, that one extra thing, and then, you know, the other ones can kind of allow you to interact with the already set turn order of that auction. I mean, there's a lot of platforms for it gets messy there, and I'm starting to crawl into the rabbit hole of how amazing Age of Steam is. And we're not just
do that for a
Age of
long
Steam.
while. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing, like with that auction, I always tell new players when I'm teaching them Age of Steam, just so you know, to keep this in mind for the auction. If you're winning every auction, you're not winning Age of Steam. If you're losing every auction, you're probably also not winning Age of Steam. It's all about
timing.
winning the auction when you need to.
It's all about timing, yeah. Well, and like you said, with those things that subvert the turn order, like winning the auction to go first is great because you think I'm going to build first, I'm going to move cubes first. With that whole pickup and delivery thing, specifically on some maps, oh my goodness, the cubes can become so rarefied out there.
Yeah.
And with that move first action that you can sometimes take during the auction and subvert that whole line of first, second, third, maybe you're fourth, and you go, I'm going to take move first and take those cubes that everyone was hoping that they'd get for their like.
Slice
Then
that
the person who won the
tendon,
auction
man.
is just silently glaring at you across the page.
Especially if you do it 2 deliveries we're set up for a 5 on. Ooh.
Yeah.
Have you ever played, anybody here, have you guys ever played Rolling Freight at all? It's been compared in our chat as a dice train game that's
I've heard of it.
to Railways of the World, Age of Steam, but with dice involved. No, right? Okay. There is dice in Age of Steam. So, I mean, it does include dice, but it's in a much more... It's in a minimal aspect of the game, but it definitely still is enough to frustrate players. I think that was one of Seth Jaffe's reasons that he preferred Railroad Tycoon over Age of Steam, if I recall. But it was one of those, like the way that cubes come back on the board being randomized by a handful of dice is something that I think that he disliked. It was definitely some other criticisms, but yeah, that was among them. So I guess we don't have anything, unfortunately, to add to Rolling Freight. But we've so far talked about Winsome Games and now Age of Steam, the sort of family where you own your own company and it involves auctions and building out on the map and then pick up and deliver. So what do we talk about next? We want to just go, I think it makes most sense to move into 18xx and then kind of like talk about Crayon Rails, because they're just kind of, you know.
You know, we kind of hit Crayon Rails a little bit already, but yeah. Before we hit 18xx, I do want to just, for those of you, TC, you've played Age of Steam, is that right? Or
Yes.
Okay, I just, you know, maybe for those listening who want to get Age of Steam but are like, well, what would be an interesting map to get? Could you just list maybe your top 1 or 2 maps that you think would be interesting and what's interesting about them?
I've only played Age of Steam on the base map, so I don't know anything. I can tell you the ones I'm interested in, like playing on the Sun looks cool. Disco Inferno looks awesome.
Yeah.
There's a few other ones that just look just look crazy as all get out. But I've only played Age of Steam on the map that came in the box. But I've seen some maps that make me want to try them, especially Disco Inferno. It's called Disco Inferno.
Yeah. By the way, it specifically says in the rules, if you start like humming disco, like you're penalized.
Yes. Well, I'm going to jump in here and insert Andy because I'm going to let you go last. I think you're kind of more the expert on this, but you know, the base map itself is, you know, it's that sort of classic. You know, it doesn't add or change. You know, it's like playing 1830. So a lot of people will say that it's not maybe the best one to start with. But I think that with Age of Steam, considering it is like a pared down game system that doesn't have a super high entry, you know, like not many players are going to be like, oh, that game's 2 hours. I will never do that. You know, it might not be one that you play every game, or might not be one that you'll play just on the draw. You know, like, hey, you want to play this game? No. But I think most people will accept a game that's the length of Age of Steam. So I think that, you know, for that reason, that the base map, the Rust Belt is what they call it. It's kind of like a northern, it's Ohio. It's like kind of the northern eastern side of the Midwest states. You know, the Midwest that counts. And I'm saying that as an Iowan who's like not really included on the Age of Steam map.
There's Des Moines in the Rust Belt map.
Yes, Des Moines is in the. They actually, yeah, I guess it is clear on the western side. So never mind. It's just, we're out in we're the one dot in like this huge area, whereas there's all this stuff in Ohio that's all, yes. But I guess our presence is felt there. I really do enjoy, and I think that maybe one of the best for learning the game, if you want to give a map that's kind of nicer and has room for everybody. I really like the Vermont map, which is almost interchangeable with the New Hampshire map because it is just a less interactive, and really like I love the interaction in Age of Steam, but I don't blame new players. They get frustrated when they're trying to grok a game system and they have people stabbing them from all these different angles. It's like you just are not, unless you're a really, really quick learner, which I am certainly not. I get really frustrated when I feel like people are already cutting my feet out from under me and I don't know what's happening. So in Vermont, I think that even though you might not have the winning score, you're not going to have somebody that's just up in your face. It's what makes these games fun is not the Vermont map for me, but I recommend it to newer players because it feels like there's kind of a slice of pie for everybody and not, like one person's going to start spiraling into bankruptcy, which is what makes Age of Steam so amazing. So, but that would be where I'd say a good entry point. And I'll let Andy actually say, what his favorite maps are, because I just haven't played enough to really say much about the other maps.
Yeah. My favorite ones I've played so far would be, I think Four Corners. That is brutal. Cause the big thing with Age of Steam is trying to alternate colors. So you don't want to be delivering to the same colors all the time. And in Four Corners, like anywhere you start, it's the same color city. So like the battle over urbanization is just insane.
Yes.
In the early game for that one. And then invariably, if you have 4 people playing Four Corners, like everyone builds in the plains and you have that one person's like, fine, screw it. I'll go in the mountains. I'll be that one. And you have to dig your way out. The other one I've played, I really liked. Let's see. China. China was interesting because you have to pay a fee to connect to a city. And the fee is equal to the numerical value of the city. So if you want to connect to a level 6 or like the 6 dice city, you have to pay another $6 to make that connection. And but they do some funky things. Like normally in Age of Steam, you always have to build off track connections you've built. But I think in China, if I remember right, you can come in from other locations just as long as it's on the coastline, which makes things really funky. And on the reverse of that is Mexico, which I haven't played, which has a mechanic called nationalization, where basically you can pick it and then you can look at someone and go, oh, look at that track you were building. Yeah, let's nationalize that. Okay, you don't get points for it at the end of the game now.
That sounds like something straight out of an 18xx game.
Oh, God, it's vicious. The 2 things I probably want to try most, I haven't got the chance to because they would require some people who know what they're doing.
Advanced play. I know what one of them is.
Yeah, Taiwan Cube Factory, where there's no production. You collect cubes and you have to fuse them into other cubes. And try to...
Yeah, I just recently played that one and it was fabulous. I mean, it takes the small random element that exists in Age of Steam on the base map specifically, which is this production piece where you have to roll dice and depending on which dice, they'll go to specific cities. And it shifts that into when you're doing deliveries of cubes, you actually retain that as a player. So now I'm not just thinking about making money for my company, but I want to think I need a blue and a red cube because there's also a little formula chart. You can change red and blue into, let's say, the black cube or purple or something like that. And so there's a whole mix of these different possible formulas, but you often need 2 cubes to change into 1. And then you can actually place those things with the production action in any city that you want. So it gives a high level of control of what you can actually produce as a player and where you can actually put it.
Yeah, I've heard like avoiding bankruptcy in that one is really hard.
Oh yeah, and all the builds are twice as much. That's right.
Yeah. The other one I want to do just because it sounds insane is the Vermont map you mentioned. There's a New Hampshire map on the other side. I've got 2 copies. because you can do like a game that plays up to 8 with the Vermont and the New Hampshire map together. And then depending on which map you're on and you can transition between them is what rule set you have to play by. So if you're in New Hampshire, you have to play by the New Hampshire rule set. But if you're in Vermont, you have to play by the Vermont rule set. And then there's like a smuggling action to smuggle cubes across the border to the other maps to use. I don't know, just like playing 8 players for hours doing that. Just that would be stupid fun.
If you all knew the game, that could just be something fantastic. That could be like your epic level TC.
Exactly.
Your 9-player TI4, TI3 game. So
I'll just mention one before moving on here that I want to play, because Taiwan Cube is one of my favorites right now. But the one I have that I haven't gotten to the table because I think it just requires that exactly 4 very experienced Age of Steam players is Golden Spike.
Oh, I have it too. Yeah.
So this map is long. It's like a 4-part board, but you put it out lengthwise, and it's a team game. So it's actually semi-cooperative. So 2 players are working on one side and 2 players start on the other side, and it's a race to the center. So the first person to build a tile on the Golden Spike hex in the middle of the board immediately ends the game. And so the interesting thing is, both of these teams want to hit that spike first, but only one of your team members is going to win the game by doing it. or I guess, the trigger, of course, will be based on the timing of it all. So it looks absolutely bonkers.
Well, very cool. So we've talked now about we've got through Age of Steam and that sort of branch. Now let's go up a little bit here and get to 18xx. And I do want to circle back around to talk about Cube Rails, because I think that's the one where I might have the most have more to say than the other things that you've got going on here. But now here's the baby of when people say train games. 18xx is what a lot of people just identify as. If you're not talking about 18xx, then saying you're a train gamer is not. It's not how you identify it. Train gamer is kind of like, I want to say, like, they should just write for a copyright and say to say train gamer, to put train gamer on the box, a train game on the box, it needs to be an 18xx game. So, Luke, could you describe what is an 18xx game for people who've never heard of this before?
I mean, to really, really boil it down, I think an 18xx game fuses together 3 things. It is about route building and thus running companies to sort of mimic deliveries by connecting locations that have value. So that's one aspect. It is about owning fractional ownership in each of these companies. So I have X number of stock in that company, and however well that company pays out each turn, I also reap the benefit, right? And then the third thing it does, and I'll frame this differently, is it includes a tech tree sort of element with trains. And that dynamic of requiring trains that harmonize with that route building, that also then harmonize with how much money that company's paying out with that sort of fractional ownership of things, is what I think makes it really quite fascinating. And just there's between this trifecta of an 18xx game, there is incentives going in all possible directions there. And the need to balance those 3 things is of utmost importance.
What a fantastic, succinct explanation. Because if you gave me that many words about 18xx, I don't even think I'd be able to give people an idea that this is a game that's about, trains. But that's exactly right. I mean, those are the 3 mechanical components: stock, the routes, and then the trains themselves, which form like the tech of it. So yes, these 3 main components. And really, to what degree the game emphasizes which of those 3 elements, sort of like subsections it off into, like your sort of operations game, which is more about, it would be more about the route building. You've got your sort of stock market shenanigans game, which will have like, different things you can do on that stock market. And then you've got your tech tree game, which usually, if a game really highly emphasizes the trains in the game, it's doing it in one of 2 ways. Either it's having lots of different trains to choose from that make the game kind of more open for the route building style, of games, or it's making it so that it's super tight, and when trains get purchased, other trains become obsolete and unusable, and making it much more difficult. And that would push it more towards, I would say, a shenanigan type game, but certainly like just a tight cutthroat. Generally, the stock style of games tend to have that tight cutthroat element of trains. And whereas the more operation style games let you use your trains and at least get some guaranteed mileage out of those trains. You don't end up buying a train and then seeing it never run.
Yeah, and I think you framed it well. Those two sort of subfamilies, the stock game and the operations game, and within an 18xx game, the way the game is actually structured is there's always a stock round and then a set of operating rounds, and that set usually depends on what point of the game you're in, and that's often governed by the purchase of trains, right? So as the train technology increases, the number of operating rounds, the number of things companies can do just increases and increases between each of those stock rounds. But it's that alternating between stock round, operating round, stock round, operating round that kind of defines the actual play of an 18xx game.
Right. Kind of, and also like the way I think of an 18xx as well as sort of the four genres. Like if I sum them up in the way I think about them in my head, like when I think of 18xx, I think of long-term planning payoff. It's going to be a very like everything I do is moving towards a plan that I have from the beginning of the game onward. Whereas Age of Steam, like to me, the crux of that is tension, just tension. Where and then you get into Winsome, like the way I think of those games is quirky. They're all funky games, man.
Well, we're talking about 18xx now, Andy. We will come back to that. You are going to be
18xx though. I think the big thing about that is if you enjoy a game that is all about long-term planning, I start here, I think I'm going to end up here. This is the steps I want to take to get there. I've found very few games that will give you the satisfaction that 18xx games do in that setting.
Yeah. I like how you framed it, Andy. Age of Steam is about tension, and I find 18xx is about moments. Like, this is the moment that could be a game, and sometimes you have to work towards that. You might have it in your mind, or it might emerge throughout the gameplay as like, there is this moment coming when I'm going to make this move. I can see it 2 stock rounds from now. I need to get priority deal. There's just so much you have to lay out in front of you. Lay out those tracks, right? And prepare and plan to make that moment happen. I can give an example. I actually just played a game of 1849 last night. Whoever follows my Twitter obviously sees only 18xx games pictures on that account. But there was, afterward, I didn't win. Another friend of mine won. It was a 3-player game, and the guy who lost, we were just dissecting what happened, and he's like, there was this moment I missed the opportunity where I didn't see it, where I could have dumped my company on the player who won, and that would have just like that thing would have created cascading effects for the rest of the game, right? And there's these like one moves in a moment that could completely reshape the thing. And I'm finding myself, what I love about 18xx is finding those openings. And so if I know I'm losing, I need to change the game state. It's not about making better moves. It's about changing the game state to alter it differently so that you can start getting those micro advantages and hopefully get to the top. I wasn't able to do it. The game changer that I attempted to do was to consolidate into one company, my best train, so that my payouts were higher, because I knew that my stock appreciation wasn't going to win me the game. The player who won the game had the better stock value, but I was thinking, if I can keep getting payouts every operating round, I might be able to catch him on my cash. But it's like these tiny things that you do, but they're, if that makes sense, moments.
No, and it does, because there's a lot of times in an 18xx, once you're semi-experienced with them, you can almost think back to the point of, this is where it all went to hell. Like, this was the thing I did. My favorite example of that for me is 18OE. We played a full game of that, and it took us 24 hours spanned over 3 days. And the sad part of this was we were at hour 16, and I looked at my buddy that we were playing with, and I'm like, you know, it's taking me this long to realize I lost this game in the first 30 minutes.
That would make sense though, Andy, because like you mentioned quirky for Cube Rails games, and I would say that a Cube Rails game can have a very inconsistent feel to how like money gets spent and money gets made, whereas 18xx games are much more deliberate. And from the very beginning, the only thing that's sort of quote unquote like quirky about it, the only thing that where you're kind of like laying things out that you'll then see how it plays out for the entire game is that initial auction. So the way that you set up the game is determining how things are going to play out, but then you play it for like, you know, you play this entire game, this very involved game, whereas that type of moment that you have at the beginning of the 18xx game where you totally lost the game and you didn't realize it until hour 16, but it happened in you know, like 1/48th of your way in the game, like that could happen in a Cube Rails game at any moment because you're continually, every time a share becomes available, it's available to any player at, you know, a certain, like at an auction. So it, you know, it has this ongoing auction that continues to sort of direct the game in a different place. Whereas 18xx is much more like players are the ones that are like, you know, sort of like these currents that are occasionally shoving each other around, but it's very much like you know, that game at the carnival where you're trying to hit, you know, with your water thing, you're trying to hit your thing on the line, and you know, you've got your idea of where you're going to be, and you're not going to you know, shove each other that much. It's going to be much more about like how well you've upgraded your water gun. I guess, I don't know. It's a terrible metaphor, but I hope that you kind of get to the core of it a little bit better than that. Maybe we'll have a new terrible metaphor, not just crappy sandwiches, but now we also have bad water game races. So, but yeah, like the players are much more in control of dictating the direction that the game's going to go. And those moments, like you're saying, that where the game takes a left turn are dictated by what players have done to set up, and not like an auction where somebody overextended, or an auction where somebody got something for super cheap and then found themselves in a position where they could then continually auction off things and get more stuff. So,
or an event card. Sorry.
Oh, when, where, what is there? Is there any?
No. Had some no 18xx though.
No, I'm mocking that. Like we're saying, the game can shift, right? And
right.
I feel as though it can happen through the auction. It can also in certain games happen through event.
Yes.
This is very player driven, which is very different than a game driven shift, right?
Yeah, like Battle of 5 Armies might do that same sort of thing through like an event card, say.
Yeah, exactly.
I just give you crap.
Yeah, it is based on all the decisions at the tables of the players and what they're doing. Excuse me. And that's something I really enjoy about them as well. Is kind of that low luck aspect.
Well, there's not any luck in many of the Cube Rails games. There's no luck involved that you can't like sort of, you know, that isn't addressed by some sort of a balancing mechanic, usually in auction. So I mean, you know, it's players that are punctuating it. It's just that the games, I would say that there's as much swinginess that can happen in an 18xx game. The difference is though that like, you know, like if you get a train rusted on you in an 18xx game, that probably happened because somebody noticed it. But here's what I would say though. To a certain extent, I wonder to how much it's like there's a hot potato that's being passed around in the 18xx, and somebody's going to end up, you know, like going down with the ship. Somebody's going to do that in many of them in those really tight games. But because that's such a known thing, then can't you kind of keep drawing back the curtains until you see that, like, hey, because the game started this way, you are the one who is going to rust? How deterministic is it?
There's so much depth within each of those elements of an 18xx game, right? Like, the train rusting obviously is this tension piece, but the way you operate your companies and the fact that you can possibly own 2 or 3 or like multiple companies and the ability to juggle and all the there's all these like elements of the rules that provide that depth for you to get around those possible shifts and changes in the current of the game, right? And so it's as much about going with the flow as it is about making the flow change directions, right?
Yeah, like once you start getting experienced with 18xx, there's very much currents going in the game. And if you're not the one kind of in charge of that current, then your goal is to figure out how to disrupt that current.
Mm-hmm.
And it can lead to weird things too sometimes, because people be like looking at me like, why did you get out of that company and start a new one? Like you're in last. And I'm like, that's the point. I need to try something to destabilize what's currently happening, because I'm going to lose if we don't. And so you try new things, or you try things to disrupt that current. Because you can see within an OR or two, once you get experience and you're starting to pay attention to payouts and stock increases, it's possible to look at someone and go, if I do not do something different, that person wins. Like, it doesn't matter how efficient I am. They have set it up in a way that if I don't break this current, they win. What can I do to break this current?
And that really is kind of what I would say characterizes an 18xx game is, there's always somebody, there's always one player who's in a favorable position, and the entire rest of the table, if they are true 18xxers, are not going to be comfortable in that situation. Everybody's going to be having some sort of, of a dynasty they're looking to advance to the forefront of, the being that railroad baron. It really is, 1830 is railways and robber barons. And that's what you're trying to do to each other. It's not, like, hey, let's find a way to have the most money made. It's no, I want $1 more than every other player. And if that means that every other player goes bankrupt and I'm the only one left, then that's a favorable outcome. It really is like, you have to be prepared and resilient towards players really looking to disrupt any of the plans that you have and advance the game state to a point where you can't keep up, and it's going to be 2 to 3 turns before you realize that they've been cooking this, they've been hatching this plan, that you needed to be able to react to. And I think that your best 18xx players are going to, be experienced with the tricks that can sort of take them from the peak position, like in the race, the sort of curves where they need to be on the lookout for other players gaining ground on them.
Yeah, my friend Chris, who's a regular with my 18xx group, every time I introduce a new title, he wants to know specifically and exactly what the little differences in rules are, because he always says every different rule is a tool, right? It's something to use, and it's in there for a reason, and it's so specific for a reason, right? So in 1849, the fact that, like, if the company gets all the way down in the stock market, there's a close. Hey, how can I leverage that ability to close companies, right? It's just one little thing. It takes a second to say that in the rules, but it's like a lifetime, literally, to try to understand how to manipulate that in ways that are beneficial within that game.
Or in like 46, where I was trying to demonstrate to some new people like tricks you can do. So in the opening stock round, I started a company with the express position of dumping shares in it immediately, using it to buy a buttload of trains, then buying all the trains over for like $1 each, and then letting the company die. So then I start with a company with loads of money and like 3-2 trains that paid $3 for. And they're like, oh, you can do that? Yeah. That's, or like 18OE again is another one where when I initially played it, because I hadn't had a lot of 18xx experience, some of the mechanisms felt more like safety nets. And I'm like, oh, well, that's just a safety net to keep you from dying in the game. And then as I played it a little more and got more familiar with 18x, I'm like, no, that's a tool. That's not a safety net. No, there's an advantage to doing that on purpose.
It's more like a wrestling ring, and it's more like you're bouncing yourself off the ropes more so than just keeping you from falling out the ring. You can use it to leverage and come back stronger.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys. Favorite 18xx games. What are the? I mean, we've mentioned 1846 as being a great entry tool into the 18xx genre. What are some? What would you call the? I mean, obviously, like time length, the amount of running time a game has can have an adverse effect maybe on options and and realistically what can get played. But what is your 18xx? What would you say is the best place that you would want to get players to if they're going to join your 18xx group?
Well, I guess I could start. I mentioned 1849, which we played last night. I've said to my friends, this is the 18xx game I dream about while playing other 18xx games. It's just that good. Honestly, it does everything so well. It's available, which is a nice deal. And it's short. Generally, I think we can do it in 3.5 hours as a crew. And that's extremely appealing to me. When I can get an 18xx game that's under 4 hours, I'm very happy about that. And then it just has all the elements that I enjoy personally for my taste in 18xx gaming. The sort of stock shenanigans can be brutal. That ability to close companies, that tiny little bit is revolutionary. It includes 2 different tracks. There's narrow gauge and standard gauge, and so there's a dynamic of setting yourself up for the long-term game with that. So that's just another long-term planning dynamic with 1849. It's got a volcano that explodes, which completely destroys the track and tokens within a city. Who doesn't love that? Train Rush is pretty brutal.
Figure out if there's like a strategy to pick that company where you can pick your starting location and pick that as a starting location.
Yeah. The private companies are fantastic in 49. I don't know. It has just so many tools and so much teeth. But you can buy station tokens, and then there's sort of an advanced game, and there's variations within the game as well that you can add in here or there if you like to explore a little bit. 49 is just fabulous. As I've played a number of titles now, this is one I keep wanting to come back to, and it has a pacing thing that I really enjoy. So I'll just leave it with that one.
Have you tried 18 Mechs?
Yes, I really do like that one. That one is, if I had to suggest, if you wanted to go 1846 and you didn't necessarily want 1889, which I think is another good sort of parallel game to 46, I think 18 Mechs is probably a tiny next level up, but fantastic game.
Yeah, it has some nice little teeth and mechanisms in it too. I really like that one. It's kind of a next step game. For me personally, I think it depends on my mood at the time, but I tend to break my 18xx games into 2 distinct categories. The categories are games that are vicious, and games that are just insane in the sense of they threw every mechanism in there but the kitchen sink. Out of the vicious category, probably my favorites would be about 49, maybe Ireland. Ireland, if you can get a good play count on it, is pretty nasty. And in the category of threw everything but the kitchen sink in, probably my favorites there right now would be 62 and 44.
What about 1822? How would you characterize that one?
It goes into the everything but the kitchen sink category.
Everything.
Yeah.
Well, it seems to me that it's really looking at sort of modern, what people are looking for is a system. There's randomness in 1822, right? I mean, there's in
the sense of what comes out when. I think 1822, out of all the 18xx I played, 1822 allows someone to play the kind of game they want to play more than any other game. If you want to be a merger person, you can be a merger person. If you want to do a little shenanigans, the stock market kind of allows for that. It's mostly, I think, a run good companies game, but I think it allows the people to, through the auctions and what's available, to play the style of game you really want to out of it. It's felt like that to me.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for telling us all about 18xx games. And I'd like to quickly circle back around because I didn't get a chance to say this. My favorite games in the Cube Rails Winsome genre, for an entry level in, I would consider, and none of these are going to be, well, I guess I will put at least one Winsome game on. But I think that if you're starting out into any stock game, if you want to get into train games, actual train games, as light as you can go, I believe is Mini Rails. I believe that it is easier to teach, easier to play than Paris Connection, and just shorter in general. But it still has like stocks that where at the end of the game you don't have to figure out any payouts really. It's super easy. Like every time somebody buys stocks, you just move all of your stuff up one or move it all down one. And it has a random, like not a random, but a variably set up board that's really, really cool. And then in between rounds, there is a setup of sort of a drafting line that'll determine turn order for next round. That's kind of nifty because a lot of cube rails win some games do something interesting for like turn order for the next round, like American Rails does. But I really like that as an entry level in. I've actually never played Paris Connection, but I know kind of like the general idea of it. And knowing the difference between those, I'm pretty sure I would be still firmly in the mini rails. It's different from other cube rails games, but those things make it easier. Next up, I would say either interchange Chicago Express, American Rails, Wabash Cannonball is one of its forms, and really like this is sort of your standard, like your standard mid-weight cube rails game, where everything that it does is kind of like that firmly in the cube rails ballpark. Some of these cube rails games could get to the point where it's almost like a social experiment. They're so light and so different and so quirky. Yeah, what's it called? Northern Pacific. But this is definitely like a train game. Exactly what you described, Luke, is like all those elements are in Chicago Express, right? You've got companies that have sort of specific starting areas, and then they sort of work their way towards getting to Chicago. And once they get to Chicago, then a special railway opens up that sort of like ushers in the end of the game. And it's how much money you make during the game that really is what Chicago Express is all about. There's not any like huge payouts, and I think that's something that's like sort of like the standard cube rails mantra. But my favorite in the genre is Iberian Rails. And that mixes together role selection and that jockeying for turn order as far as that goes. But then it also adds in like companies are actually owned by a specific player, whereas in other cube rails games, any player that has stock can take an action that either hurts or take an action on behalf of the company. Sometimes that's just to tank a company. Other times it's to actually actively try to get that company better. In Iberian Rails, to be in charge of a company, like the companies take turns, like an 18xx game, much like Imperial, Matt Gerst's game that probably would fit into the train game category that we've identified, though it's not about trains. But because those companies actually are the ones that take the turns, the CEO actually matters, and that pushes it up to that next level. The effects of these different the roles and the way that they actually impact how much it costs you to build track is just fascinating. It's one where you can see a gameplay out in a really different way based on what comes up in the game. It adds like just a really cool, to me, it marries together sort of, your role selection, something that as a primarily Euro player, I really love, together with cube rails, which is another thing that I really do love. So that's sort of like, I would say my three, if you're going to own any three games, own those three. And if you really want to stick it within win some games, then do Paris Connection instead of mini rails. But I really think mini rails is the way I would go. So thanks for letting me get that in there then about cube rails. And now Crayon Rails. Do we have anything else to say? Or I don't think anybody here is really an expert on Crayon Rails. It sounds like Murr from our chat, who's actually been gotten a chance to play at the inventor of the Crayon Rails genre. He's actually gotten a chance to play at his house in his group, play Crayon Rails in that way, and has a history of playing Crayon Rails. It sounds like he's really the guy that we need to have on to have a Crayon Rails episode. But for now, I think that we don't have much depth to go into aside from just, you're writing on the board. You have specific routes. You have to pay for those routes. It's kind of like separate from all these other three, train game genres. It hasn't aged, I would say, as well as these other genres have, as these other, systems have, just judging by how many people are now playing them. But there are certainly some ways, some like string railway, paperclip railways that you do see the same sort of idea of Crayon Rails, and maybe people who are like, that's not Crayon Rails, it's maybe those are more hybrid games. But anyway, there is certainly some ways in which the way that you design your own routes and they can really change drastically because you're actually writing on the board and not, limited by a tile pool or other, other sorts of, like limited because presence in a hex means that you have essentially track in and track out in any direction you want. So it definitely keeps things very open by every single route. It's just drawn on between 2 points. So.
Yeah, one last one I wanted to kind of bring up that's being designed. Have you guys seen, I think it's 18 Lilliput?
Oh, hey, Andy, you're stepping on toes. You're stepping on toes.
What?
Let's go into our hype section now. This is now, yes. Cue transition music. We are now hyping, and Andy is hyping. No, it's actually not Andy. It's Luke and Andy now. Tag team hyping.
Oh, tag team hype. I like that. Yeah,
18 Lilliput.
18 Lilliput. I mean, I don't want to step on your toes now, Andy.
I don't really know much about it. I've just seen a couple images and stuff. So
yeah. Okay. So the little I know about it, again, I'll frame a little bit of this, but we do have a prototype that we'll have available at Hattanooga. So I'm looking forward to actually playing it. And Lonnie, the designer, has also offered as a prize a backer, like one. It's gonna be put up on Kickstarter in the next little while. I don't think I can offer any timing insight on that at all, but essentially, yeah, we'll have a little prize there for 18 Lilliput as well. And the way he sold it to me, and it's not entirely true, but it's kind of 18xx the card game, and that doesn't quite frame it in the way that I should. But Joe, hearing you talk about Iberian Rails, I think there's going to be some similarities. So. I've read the rules of 18 Lilliput, and essentially what's going on here is you have sort of an action selection game. So there are, dependent on the player count, if it's 4 players, there's like 10 actions, 3 players, a few less, et cetera, et cetera. And the actions that you're taking can either be basically buy and sell stock, lay rails, and so it has all the elements of the 18xx game, but it's all into like this card selection piece. And what sounds interesting about it is in a single turn, if there's 4 players, it sort of works in a snake order. So first, second, third, fourth, and then fourth, third, second, first. We'll choose out of those 10 possible actions to take. So what it looks like was going to be quite interesting is there's going to be a real timing game again to deny taking, like if you take a stock action, you're going to deny every other player the possibility to have that stock action for that particular turn. If you take the build action, you're going to deny everybody else that. And the way I understand these cards is that they have a sort of primary action and a secondary action, and you can choose one of those possible options. So there's a bit of depth built in there. There's asymmetric start. So there's the companies themselves. There's 4 possible companies to start in the game, and each of them has sort of a different bonus. One starts maybe with like a more valuable city. One has a higher share price. And so there's a bit of asymmetry baked right into the opening there. And then there are also 5 characters which give you sort of player powers. And this is quite interesting that I'm not sure what the mechanism, if it's a draft or how you auction these things off at the beginning, but when you receive one of those, that player power will advantage every company that you own as a player throughout the game. So I have it written here, one of the characters might give free laying of yellow tiles, one lowers the cost of station markers, one reduces train costs. So those sorts of like advantages. So there's a lot of interesting asymmetry built into the sort of setup in the game. Like I said, the rest of the game basically flows with this sort of action round. So players going in that sort of snake, I call it a snake draft. I don't know what other people call it, but anyway, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1 choice of those action cards, taking those actions. And then after all those actions are taken, the trains run just like a normal 18xx game. And then after that, there's sort of just what's called a bureaucracy stage, which is kind of a cleanup piece. What looks really interesting to me as well is there's no map included. And in fact, the building of tracks starts with just a single red square in the center, and each of the 4 companies will diverge, right? They'll start in a different location, and you're just putting squares down, which have, track diagrams on them, or cities, or that sort of a thing.
Mhm.
And you basically sort of build this network of cities and track as you go, again, through the use of those action cards.
So tile placement Carcassonne type mechanism being added to 18xx here.
Yeah, it really boils 18xx down, but I think what it is doing as well,
like a 60-minute playtime even on it.
Yeah, it's an hour playtime. I have a feeling this is going to appeal to both 18xx players who want that sort of like filler that hits on all the notes of an 18xx game, and it might also work for those who are 18xx curious, like who don't necessarily have the time or want to dive into specific titles. This looks very interesting to me.
Might be a good bridge between Euro and Train Gamer kind of thing.
Absolutely, yeah, because it's got that familiar action selection piece. Yeah, it looks quite fabulous. So I'll be excited to try it in a week and a half here at Hattanooga. I can give you a better report then, but that's what I understand so far.
This has really interested me here. When you first put 18 Lilliput in here, I just figured, oh great, they're setting 18xx in Gulliver's Travels. Now Andy's game is closer to being made a reality. 18 Sodor. I was like 18 Hodor. Ooh, hold that door.
18xx dexterity game. That's what I want.
Yeah. I actually want to see that happen, because Andy's gonna have to buy it and he's gonna have to play it, and it's gonna make him miserable, just miserable. And it's gonna be like, hey Andy, you remember how you wanted this? Yep. And I'm gonna like it just because of how it makes Andy squirm.
Yeah. Yeah, like Mur says, now that we mentioned that, he's like, oh great, and I thought we were gonna make a whole episode without me needing to buy a game.
Oh, now this one looks so cool. When this one is up on Kickstarter, I'm wondering to what degree, like Iberian Rails is to Cube Rails as this 18 Lilliput is to 18xx. But I think that in many ways, it's sort of, they're kind of like maybe having opposite functions, whereas Iberian Rails sort of takes Cube Rails and then makes it a more involved and a longer game. This is like adding Euro elements to make 18xx shorter. And I would say that that's because that's the direction that I think that these games really could be pushed. Cube Rails could be more, 18xx could be less. And that's why you see this sort of hybrid that does what it's looking to do. The creation of a map and the action selection, the sort of card game you talked about. I just love how Lonnie has designed actual 18xx games. Like, he's designed big 18xx games, right? He is the one who is behind like 1824 and 1837, I believe.
And 1880,
44 or 54. He's one of those.
I mean, he's got big 18xx cred behind him, and he's also pushing. I believe is Lonnie one of the designers? No, he's not. Is he one of the designers of Terra Mystica? I know that he's one of the designers behind Russian Railroads.
Russian
Railroads. Yeah, and I think was it Lonnie, or was it the other guy that did First Class?
I'm not sure.
I don't remember. Actually. I think it was the other guy who pushed First Class.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
It pushed Russian Railroads more towards Euro than it did towards sort of the engine building and the sort of feeling of like snowballing that you get from an 18xx and building up of an economic engine. But yeah, to me, it's just absolutely fascinating. Really cool that these designers are looking to challenge what it means to be a train game. And if the designers are doing that, well, darn it, so can the players. And I think, Luke, you're really pushing for that direction. Andy, shame on you. Just shame.
What? I said I wanted to play it.
It looks good. I like what you're saying, Joe. I think Lonnie is a fairly creative designer and not just an 18xx designer, as he's proving. He's trying to
If you play 44 or 54, they have a tendency to stretch that system pretty in pretty odd ways. But I like that, so it's all good.
Nice. Well, very cool hype section there, guys. Very, very cool tag team hype, though Andy still has another one listed here. But first, I haven't heard from him in a while. TC, please tell me about it's not – well, Trent was going to talk about this upcoming Arkham Horror game.
I gotcha.
LCG thing,
I'm on it.
But,
I'm all over that one. Yes, as you guys know, the Arkham Horror card game has officially entered my top 10 games. and this is the newest campaign. The last one, the Path to Carcosa, was fantastic. This new one is going to be an archaeological adventure into the Mayan depths of the temples with snake people, and we are so chomping at the bit to get this one going. It came in. I can't wait to start it. It got 5 new characters to build. Arkham Horror, the card game, has continually impressed me with its storytelling and its campaign and its system. And while it is a bit of a money sink, it is so worthwhile. And the biggest thing I can say about this game and the system itself is that it has made Carissa want to build decks for a game again, which she completely swore off after getting burned on Magic so hard way back in the day.
Very cool, PC. And thanks for kind of taking the torch there from Trent. I know that he was really excited for that one. But that's not the only game that you're hyping, man. This is your Civ game day.
Yeah, there's so much stuff I wanted to hype. I mean, Fort Sumner has charged, so that's coming. I really want to get my hands on Welcome to Centerville. Colonial Twilight, goodness, a 2-player coin game, but I've got to hype because of Mr. Jeff Gamble way back when we talked about his top 10, and it come nowhere he said Clash of Cultures was his favorite game. And I was broadsided by that. I was like, are you serious? Really? Okay. I remember kind of liking it, but now I really want to get it and sink my teeth into it. And I found a copy at a fairly discounted rate. So we got it. We played it once. Enjoyed it. The only downside is there's an expansion, which is so out of print. It's ridiculously expensive now. It's like, oh, I'll get the expansion too. It's like $300 or something ridiculous like that. So, I remember what I liked about Clash of Cultures. We're having fun getting familiar with it again, and I'm really excited to show it to my gaming group. So yeah, that's my hype. I know it's an old one, but we're gonna see where this goes.
New to you, dude.
Yeah. I mentioned Fort Sumner charged. Mark Herman's new one. Woo! Yeah, and I apologize for being so quiet during the 18XX segment. I own one. I own 1846, and the only reason I own 1846, it was published by GMT. And honestly, there is enough in that box to keep me quite happy for quite a while. Now, I do understand the obsession you guys have with 18XX, because when I played Andy and Abyss, I'm like, I'm in for coin forever. I don't care what volume comes up. I don't care. I'm getting every single game in this system. And if you ever want to do a coin segment, I'm your guy. But, there's a lot of talk about 18XX, and I can honestly say, even if you only get 1846, there is so much in that box. I know a lot of people say it's the beginning 18XX, and it's not as vicious.
Interesting.
But I really, really enjoy it, and I still haven't felt I've explored that particular game enough to move on to another 18XX game. To be quite honest.
Yeah, I respect that. That's a great way to look at that.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of 18XX players though view that almost have a negative view of 1846 because they think that it's it's supplanting something, whereas they feel like it's this huge, they look at it as people say they're into board games and all they play is Settlers of Catan. Well, people say they're into 18XX games and all they play is 1846. That same sort of connection where it's there's all these games out there and you're just going to play that one simple one.
Well, and from what the thing I'm enjoying with 1846 is that I've seen other people play. I've seen 1830 being played. And the thing I'm enjoying about 46 is that it gives me the opportunity to explore the investment, the stock market more without having to worry about some kind of weird shenanigan coming up and biting me in the rear end. You can see the rust coming, right? Yeah, you can see a buyout coming a mile away in 46, right? So it gives me opportunity to get real comfortable with the way the investment track works and all that. So Because I've seen, like, I saw an 1830 game played, and it was like the most vicious thing I ever saw in my life. And when you guys said it was like a war game, I agree. 1830 was just that play was nasty. I thought someone was going to punch someone in that game. It was pretty
the
brutal.
last time I played it with some guys locally, like somewhere in the second OR, we all bought shares in each other's companies. Then we're all looking around. We're like, this cannot end well.
Yeah.
And then the next SR was like, I'm selling yours. I'm selling yours. I'm selling yours. And like, bloodbath.
But yeah, I've really enjoyed 46, and I've enjoyed it so much. I'm like, this is I like this. I want to keep playing this one, guys. I like 46.
No, I love that, and I'd love to come back to it more again. I think one of the things 46 does really well, and you just mentioned it here, TC, is that it really challenges your understanding of investments.
Yeah.
Like, I think investing in good companies is a difficult thing to decide and figure out how to do, right? And you got to have some foresight in that one, and because in a game like 46 where the stock market can do those double and triple jumps, stock appreciation is a huge thing, and so which stocks you own is really important.
And so there's my hype / my feelings on 18xx as I kind of fell asleep back there. Sorry.
You got trains in. Yeah.
All right. Well, now it's my turn to look into a train game, actually. I feel like, like you covered for Trent there with your hype, TC, and now I'm going to kind of cover what he otherwise would have hyped, which anybody who's listened to The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly knows that Trent loves level 99 games. Their previous games, the BattleCon system, which I was really thrilled and thought BattleCon was a really cool way to do 2-player combat. Also, Argent was an interesting game that, I had some mixed experiences with, but I still think that, like, underneath the core of the gameplay was something that I needed to give it more shots before I really made up my mind about it. So, I think it was kind of a me problem, not a game problem. Certainly tons of game content there.
Millennium Blades
as well. Yeah. And I don't even think they put that in there. I think that Millennium Blades might be set in a different world that the Endines world that Argent and them are set in. And the reason I'm doing this, I'm saying all this is because they have a game out called Imperial. And now I definitely need to spell this because it sounds like I'm hyping a Matt Gertz game from like 2004. But I'm actually hyping EMPY and then Real, REAL. So like EMPYREAL, Imperial spells and Steam, I believe. Yeah, spells and Steam. And it is a train game. And what it looks to be doing is kind of maybe marrying together Age of Steam with the way that players are controlling a specific train company, together with a Cube Rails style game where you're spreading across the map. And it's going to have that sort of like a randomly generated map like Mini Rails has. Then you add on to that you have like a player mat, and you're going to be, because you're going to be delivering things, they're going to allow you to upgrade certain elements of your train company. If you've played like Hansa Teutonica, the way that you sort of upgrade your player board, well, here you're also going to be adding cards that are special capabilities, and what you have delivered up to then determines what you can actually upgrade it, like how you can upgrade it. So also, oh man, the game's just not on the tip of my tongue. Basically, you can upgrade your own track based on what you've delivered before. Oh, the Ruhr, designed by Capstone or published by Capstone. The way that like your deliveries impact what tech you get access to. That's kind of seems like to a certain extent is what's getting explored here, where you're managing resources to purchase tech to then give you permanent upgrades, and all that is wrapped into just like a metric ton of variability. And it's got 2 different pledge levels, one of which is a deluxe level that's $34 more than the base game. And usually when they have like a deluxe game and a base game, I usually sit there and say, I'll just wait until it comes out in retail, because I'll just buy the base game, but I want to buy the base game at like the cheaper price. I don't want to pay like the higher price that you end up seeing with Kickstarter, especially when you have to pay for shipping on your own. Here's what they're adding in the deluxe game though. Resin painted resources. And it looks like, like you're basically buying like a whole bunch of just beautiful. I mean, it's going to be kind of like that, maybe like the Tasty Minstrel Deluxeified Orleans game that really went for a lot of money to everyone who sold it except for me because I'm an idiot and I don't check prices on BGG. But this just looks like it's going to be really, really cool. It looks like it's going to, like I said, marry together like it's your train company. And even the base game comes with unique minis for every one of the train company cars. So every player will get a unique set of train minis. Kind of think like Age of Steam has in its 3rd edition that everybody like the much maligned non-disc plastic train pieces that fall off of the hexes. I know they're not quite as good, but they look better than the little circles. Well, this one has those train minis, but it looks like they're going to fit on the tiles a little bit better and be actually unique to each player. So if the idea of upgrading your own train company and running your own train company, mixing together, once again, sort of like a hybrid between two different things. This looks like a really cool train game. And, it looks like it might be my first level 99 games that I've went out of my way to purchase. So not that the other ones aren't great games, just none of them have fit into my collection as squarely as this one looks to Imperial, Spells, and Steam.
A train game with mana crystals.
Well, doesn't Iron Dragon kind of do that? Iron Dragon is a Crayon Rails game that's like fantasy themed, right? And it's got like the different things that you're delivering are like ingredients to potions, but I'm pretty sure that's about as far as it gets. Like I think you have like different ships that can, maybe there's dragons in the game somewhere, but yeah, it's a marginal fantasy theme at best. Here it looks to really expand upon that and maybe even feel somewhat thematic, though the core gameplay certainly looks to be more about route building and upgrading your player board.
Thanks. That sounded interesting.
Well, that brings us here to the end. I mean, we had a pretty big list of things to hit on tonight. I mean, because of how wide train games really are, and I think that by kind of basing it on what you covered with Hattanooga, also. We branched out into other hybrids as well. I think, Luke, that this has been, considering that, I really think Luke deserves a round of applause for everybody who's sitting in your car driving. Please, hands off the wheel so you can give Luke a big round of, whoa, look out. Can we get your hands back on the wheel? Stop that. Because Luke had about like 7 to 8 hours to prepare for this. I asked him about this morning after I saw his amazing comments in the guild. Amazing job preparing for this, dude. I think it just runs in your blood. Like, this is like asking you to talk about something that you are always thinking about. It just felt like it just rolled right out, man. Great job sort of being, like I said, our engineer on this episode about train games. And thank you very much.
Thanks for the invite. It was a pleasure. It's enjoyable to talk about these things, right? We are all passionate about this hobby, and this is a particular niche that I found myself gravitating towards more and more. So yeah, it's great.
Well, and Andy,
I should say it wouldn't have been a train game episode unless it was long.
Oh boy, that's awesome, man. Yeah, it certainly is, and the longest of them all, the guy who likes the longest games, Andy here, was able to offer a nice counter to what I would call your much more measured train game perspective. So Andy's the off the rails train gamer.
I'm off the rails any gamer.
And Luke, not to say that you're conventional by any means, but I certainly can relate with you better on things. And I enjoy talking about you for that reason. So, and TC,
I'm the caboose. I'm just along for the ride.
When it's all said and done, TC. Yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like I'm probably just the person who's maybe the hobo riding on top of the train. That's yeah. Maybe it's me and TC both doing that. Yeah. So, well, thank you very much. Also to our audience that stuck with us, like you said, for this long episode. But I do think that it was worth it. I think that we covered this topic in a very fair way and spent enough time to give a perspective to each of the different areas in train games. And I look forward to our future together, working together, and maybe one day we'll be able to send a contingent up to the Hattanooga convention. Which what is the exact date on that? And just give a quick date. It's going to be coming up so soon that it'll be very difficult for our listeners to make plans.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah, this year it is May 18th to 20th, so it's just about a week and a half away here. It falls on, at least in Canada, it's May long weekend, so it tends to be that like sort of third weekend in May, and so that we're going to sort of stick with that date. So yeah, if you're looking to come at all, our website Hattanooga.ca, make sure you get that .ca in there. For you American.com people. Yeah, it has all the information you'll need on there. It has location, timing, sort of a list of the collection of games and those sorts of things if you're really eager and want to just sort of look at all the things you can't touch and have. Yeah.
No, it's been a really fun time having you on, Luke, and I think you'll have lots of fun there because you're going to be playing all kinds of fun games.
Absolutely.
All right, well, I'm just Alan, and I hope you all have a great week of gaming and catch us next week on The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly.